Yo, my name is Josh and I work as a software engineer at a USA-based company called Upstash. And in this single video, you and me will build an entire Next.js shop from absolute beginning to complete end, to deploying it, getting it live on the internet. We're gonna do that from scratch together in this one video. You can probably guess, that's why it's so long. Along the way, you're gonna learn three things in this video. The first one is how to build beautiful, functional front-end UI. We're gonna think about animations, about fonts, about backgrounds, how to make this look really good. So if you put this on your portfolio, it's going to stick out. I even went as far as hiring a professional illustrator to illustrate the artworks for this project, all of which are completely free, provided to you. Secondly, this is complete beginning to end. There is no course at the end that I'm trying to upsell you, all in this video. And that even involves the admin dashboard. When a user orders from our store, of course, we need a way to manage that order. So the admin dashboard is completely included in this video as well. And now before we get to the demo, the third thing that I want you to learn in this video, and that is the concepts, the thinking behind writing great software. This video is not only coding along with me, we go in depth into the concepts of why things work as they do. How do you implement a secure payment system? That was the reason my first ever potential freelance client rejected me, because I didn't know how to. And I want to teach you how to do it. That includes modern data fetching patterns in Next.js, and it also includes code conventions, kind of best practices that I learned along my developer jobs and that I want to teach you in this video as well. So that is my promise to you. That's what you're gonna learn in this video. Let's get to the demo. And welcome to Case Cobra, your image on a custom phone case. Case Cobra, what I named this application, allows you to capture your favorite memories with one-of-one phone cases. You can see an example here on the right hand side, a phone case with a custom pet image, and the user will be able to choose that image, as you'll see here in a second. We have a testimonial section with beautifully styled green accents. I styled all of this myself, and of course the green comes from the Cobra color, right? So these accents are really important and you'll find them throughout the entire website. And this image right here, along with the image you saw on the very top, are the ones that are actually illustrated by the illustrator that I hired for this project. So not only are we gonna build a completely functional shop from beginning to end, but the entire landing page with social proof and a beautiful example product section, fully animated, are all included in this video. And we're gonna do them first. And we're gonna do that animation purely with Tailwind CSS, which is gonna be beautiful. And lastly, to make it very clear what our website does, upload your own photo and get your own case. Now, to make very clear to potential users that check out your shop what this is actually about, right? Any image can go on the phone case with high quality silicone material, scratch and fingerprint resistant coating, and a bunch of other points, of course, that only serve as an example. So let's do it. Let's create our own case, and that's gonna take us to the upload section right here, where we can either click to upload or fully implemented a beautiful drag and drop functionality. So I'm going to open this image up right here. This is my pet rooster, and let's drag this in. So fully drag and drop supported right here. That's going to upload our image to a super scalable cloud storage, which is AWS S3, and then redirect us to the actual main page of this app where we can style our custom phone case. As the styling options, let's make this image a bit smaller so you can see this. We can first off choose the color out of 3 supported. You can support any color that you want. It's incredibly easy, and we can just go ahead and choose those different colors. My personal favorite is black. Let's select the iPhone 15 as the model that we want to choose for this phone case. And now the Apple inspired radio selectors. If you've ever bought any Apple product on the Apple Store, you know they do it just like this, with exactly these radio buttons where you can choose between the different quality of materials. So for example, for the material, let's choose the premium soft polycarbonate material, and for the finish, let's also choose the textured finish. And pay attention to what happens to the price. It updates, bam, in real time as we choose these different options. In our case, let's go with the fully premium spec'd out version of our phone case. And of course, the user can style the image however they want. They can drag it around as they wish, even without these boundaries right here. Scale it up, scale it down, position it however they think the phone case looks best. And I think in our case, it looks best like this. That looks really nice. Let's continue like this by hitting the continue button. And as we continue, you can see right here on the top, we always keep track of the current step that we are in and the upcoming steps with the illustrations provided by the illustrator. And there we are, our iPhone 15 case, the model that we chose in stock and ready to ship, with the preview, exactly how your user configured the image to be. Even with a highlight section, right? Wireless charging compatible, shock absorption, and so on. Why should people buy from you? I think that's really cool. And then the material that we use for our phone case, and a summary for the prices with dynamically the premium options that we chose, of course, listed each one separately, so we get to the order total listed right here. If a user tries to buy without being logged in, of course, that doesn't really work, right? Therefore, we're gonna save their progress. Very important, nothing is lost. The entire configuration as we did it is fully saved at this point. And we can now log in using the sponsor of today's video, which is Kind. They make it incredibly easy to integrate fully working secure authentication into your app. And without them, a video of this size would never be possible. You cannot imagine how much work this is. So I'm really thankful that Kind sponsors this video. It integrates extremely easy in minutes to your application, and the authentication just works. We can enter our email. That's going to send us a code to our inbox. So let's grab that code and copy it over, hit continue, and that's going to log us in and automatically redirect us. So honestly, big thank you to Kind for sponsoring this. And if you want to support me and this video, there's going to be a link in the description that if you click it, they're going to know that you came from me. Of course, you don't have to use that link, but if you do, thanks. Now, what about our iPhone 15 case? As you can see, we are on the last step right here, the summary, where we can review our final design and actually check out to purchase this case. So let's do that. That's gonna forward us to a hosted checkout page using Stripe, where we can input our email and the complete shipping address. And let's actually pay for this product. So I'm gonna input the payment details right here and then hit pay. No, we don't want to save the card, and that's fully automatically going to process the payment for us securely in the background. And when this payment goes through, you're gonna see this button turn green and two things are gonna happen. First off, it's gonna load our order and verify that our order was correct. Your case is on the way. So this means we have actually received the payment. We are sure this is verified by Stripe, and we can also see a live preview of a user holding the phone, exactly how the user configured it with their image and how they sized and positioned the image and so on in real time right here on the thank you page. That is awesome. We have also the shipping address, the billing address, the payment status, which is actually paid, of course, and the shipping method and the product price. And also fully automatically, the user receives an email from CaseCopa thanking them for their purchase and telling them when it's gonna be delivered. And you might have noticed there's a secret dashboard button up here, and that's only visible. This button is only visible for one person, and that's you. That's the admin of the page. For nobody else, this button is visible, and also nobody else could visit the page even if they try to. This is fully secure, where two things happen. First off, your goals, right? How much revenue is your goal for this week? We're tracking the progress on your financials and also for the month, right? So we have a $500 per week goal and a $2,500 per month goal with our shop. And not only that, you can see all the incoming orders that I just made, this one right here and the ones I did before, which are gonna be, of course, the ones that your customers make, with the option to track the status between awaiting shipment by default. And once you've forwarded this request to your supplier or printed the case yourself and it's ready to be shipped, bam, just change the status right here and you can keep track of everything. And if something is fulfilled, well, great, just change it here and it's done. And you never lose focus of your financial goals with this shop. After that's all done, let's sign out. That's gonna redirect us back to the homepage where we started, your image on a custom phone case, and you're gonna learn so much. As I mentioned in the beginning of the video, good design, drag and drop functionality, implementing secure payments, implementing an admin dashboard. Dude, I could go on and on. I put so much effort into the design of the page right here with the phone case, and I'm pointing at my monitor that everything looks good, that everything works, and I want to teach you how to do it all right now. If you have any questions on the way, my Discord is in the description. We're gonna have a separate forum just for this project and your questions. So start your code editor, follow along. That's by far how you learn the most. I really encourage you to follow along at your own pace to learn this with me, and then let's get started. Okay, man, let's finally get started. Let's get coding. I hope you're ready. I hope you prepared everything, your code editor. That's all you need pretty much. And I'm gonna start right here on the desktop. So let's open up our terminal and cd to the desktop, because that's where I want this project to live. But of course, you decide where to put this project, right? And then we're gonna say pnpm dlx. And by the way, pnpm dlx, if you've never used pnpm before, is the same thing as npx, right? It's the same thing, just for different package manager. It does the same thing, pretty much the same as yarn, right? It doesn't really matter which one you use. I'm gonna use pnpm dlx because that's automatically going to install all the dependencies for Next using pnpm as a package manager, which I really like. So we're gonna say pnpm dlx or npx create-next-app, at latest. So it's going to use the latest Next.js version. And then we're going to hit enter. First thing that's probably going to ask us, yes, is the project name. What do we want to name this? Let's say Case Cobra. And you can hit enter right now because I've already got a project named exactly this. I'm going to say -dev, but same thing. Let's hit enter. And that's going to ask us a lot of questions. Would you like to use TypeScript? Oh, hell yes, we do. Very important. Would you like to use ESLint? Yes, we do. It just makes good code quality a bit easier. Let's use Tailwind CSS. Yes. Would you like to use the source directory? This is very much personal preference, right? I really like doing this. I think the code is more like you have a better overview of the code that way. So I'm going to choose yes here. But you don't have to. Would you like to use app router? Yes, we're going to use the app router. And no, we don't want to customize the default import alias. Perfect. That's going to install all the packages using pnpm, which is really fast because it uses symlinks, so it doesn't download all of the packages you can see right here. It downloaded only 4 and then it added the rest because it reused those packages from other projects that I already have that use the same dependencies. And that's why pnpm is so fast. But in the end, it doesn't really matter if you use npm or yarn or pnpm. You can follow along using any package manager. Awesome. That installed everything. Let's clear the screen and then let's cd into that directory we have just created. Case Cobra -dev, or in your case, maybe just Case Cobra, whatever you named it. Hit enter. And in this directory, let's say code dot. And all that's gonna do, code dot, is say VS Code, open up the current directory. That's what the dot is for. And that's gonna open this up here on my left-hand side. Beautiful. Let's zoom in so you can see this a lot easier. And first thing we're gonna do is verify if everything went correctly. So I'm gonna say yarn dev or npm run dev, same thing. We're gonna execute the dev script. And ideally that's gonna start our development server that we can now use and verify that Next.js has in fact installed correctly. So we should see like the basic blank Next.js page right here once this loads. And sometimes the first time this loads takes really long. I think that's normal. Yes, there we are, default Next.js page, beautiful, everything went correctly. And the reason because it takes so long for the first time is because it has to create the .next folder where it draws all the stuff from, like the chunks and everything that it uses to display the website. The first time we start our app, well, it doesn't have that folder, you know, it has to create everything from scratch. Beautiful, now we know that Next.js is installed successfully. Beautiful. And the first thing that we're gonna do together is start at the landing page and make things look good. And why doesn't this take up all of the screen space? There we go, perfect. Okay, so first thing we're gonna do is start on the landing page to see like results fast, right? So we're gonna stop the development server for a second. There we go. And the first thing we're going to do right now is say npx shadcn-ui at latest init in our command line. Now, what does this mean? If you're not familiar with what this does, basically shadcn-ui is a component library, right? Basically like a UI library, you could say, that gives us very nice looking styles out of the box. It's accessible. I use it a lot on my projects. I really like it. And just executing the init command, the initialization command here in our CMD is going to do a bunch of stuff. The first thing it's going to do is ask us a bunch of questions. Which style would you like to use? Doesn't really matter what you go for here. It's very much personal preference. I like New York. Let's go for zinc as the base color. It's going to ask us, would you like to use CSS variables? Yes, we do. That's important. We're gonna hit yes there, and that's gonna do some stuff. So for example, one thing it's gonna do is create a lib folder with a utils.ts file. We didn't do that, right? Next.js didn't do that. That's what the initialization command just did right here. And this is a really useful function we're gonna reuse a lot across the entire application that basically allows us to merge class names. It's very handy. You're gonna see that later. And out of the box, we get it with the UI library. Same thing as some changes to our globals.css, right? It puts some colors here that look great out of the box that we can also change later if we want. But all the default styles that come with it look pretty good, as you're going to see here in a second when we start with a landing page. So this is going to make it much easier to get a good looking landing page. And then we're going to start back up yarn dev, npm run dev, or development server. Okay, beautiful. So let's navigate to the main page.tsx under the source/app folder right? That's where the main landing page lives that we can see when we navigate to localhost 3000. We can get rid of everything that's in here. Let's just close that down and delete the entire main tag that is in here by default. We won't need that. And then let's get started in actually building the landing page and making something truly cool. Something that you can put on your portfolio, something that you can be proud of. It's just a really nice app we're building right now together. Okay, so let's create a div with a class name, and that class name is gonna be BG Slate of 50, which is a Tailwind color. And if we hover over this, you can see what this actually does, which color this applies, like this one right here. Assuming that is you have the Tailwind CSS IntelliSense extension installed, this one right here, Tailwind CSS IntelliSense. If you've got that VS Code extension installed, then you can hover over this and see what this actually applies under the hood. I really like this extension. It's much easier to get a feeling of which CSS is actually applied that way. Okay, and inside of this div, let's create a section element. And inside of the section element, we're going to create a custom React component, and that React component is going to be called the max with wrapper. And the purpose of this max with wrapper is to be a reusable component we can, well, reuse across our entire application. So we always have a, well, the same like padding and width on the elements, right? So the page just looks very consistent. We are going to create that in our components folder right here that was made for us by the UI library. Nice. We can just use that. And let's create a new file in here called max with wrapper.tsx, TypeScript XML, and in here let's declare a const max with wrapper, and that's nothing more than an arrow function, right? Default React component, nothing special, and let's export that as the default at the bottom, the max with wrapper. There we go. Now in here, we're going to return a div element, and that div is going to get a class name, and that class name is not going to be a string, but it's going to be something dynamic. And now is the first time we're going to use our CN helper function from our utils that we can just import like so with the default import alias. And now comes two things. Okay, this function takes as much arguments as you want basically, but we're going to pass it a string first. And that's going to be the default class names that are always applied, well, by default. This is going to be a height of full, an mx-auto, a margin x of auto, a width of full, a maximum width of screen XL, a padding x of 2.5, and on medium devices and upwards, because Tailwind is mobile first, a padding x of 20. And then we're gonna say class name as the second argument into that function. Now, where does this class name come from, right? This doesn't exist in our current setup here. Well, that's gonna be passed in as a prop, a property into this React component. We're gonna receive the class name and also the children in this component. You're gonna see why the children in a second here when we use it. And to tell TypeScript the type of what these will be, we can type them out like so. We can type them right here. That's going to be the class name optionally. That's why we put a question mark. We don't have to pass it. And that's going to be a string if we do pass it. And then the children, which are of type React Node. That is a type we can simply import from React right up here, format the file, beautiful. And now we can simply render out these children right here dynamically inside of our max with wrapper component between the div. Perfect. Let's save that and let's demonstrate why we even did this. So in our main page.tsx, let's switch back. We can now import this component. And the cool thing is we can now give it a custom class name based on this specific section, which we don't want to apply to all the other times where we reuse the same component. For example, let's give it a padding bottom of 24, a padding top of 10. On large devices, we want this to take up a grid. On large devices, a grid columns of 3. On small devices, a padding bottom of 32. On large devices, a gap x of 0. On extra large XL devices, we're going to give it a gap x of 8. Then on large devices, a padding top of 24. On extra large devices, a padding top of 32. And lastly, on large devices, a padding bottom of 52. Very long class name, I know. I think this is one of the longest class names in this entire setup, don't worry. And in here we can now pass any children, a div element for example, And these children are automatically passed as a prop into our max with wrapper, right, as the children that we're accepting right here and then rendered out inside of the div, essentially just wrapping them with a reusable with approach, which is really nice. So we can reuse this across our entire app, and if we ever need some specific class name, we can apply it just like this that we don't want to reuse. Beautiful. The div inside of here is gonna get a class name of call_span2, a padding x of 6, on large devices a padding x of 0, and on large devices a padding top of 4. And inside of here, let's create one more div, and this one is gonna get a class name of relative of mx-auto, of text-center, of large text-left, of flex-call, so we can align stuff vertically, so this is the flex direction that we're applying here with flex call, in items-center, and lastly in items-start on large devices and upwards. Beautiful. Let's open up this div, and inside of here we're gonna put one more div, and this is gonna contain the snake image on the homepage. So this div is gonna get a class name of absolute. This is gonna be a width of 28, a left of 0, a minus top minus 20, a hidden, and on large devices a block. So only on large devices will this div actually be shown, right? Let's give this just a bit more space. There we go. Let's open this div up, and inside of here is gonna live an image right here. This can be self-closing, and the source of this image is gonna be /snake-1.png. And what the slash does is basically it tells Next.js, hey, we want to import an image from our local public folder. Right, so /snake1.png would be public /snake1.png. It would look for that file inside of our public folder. Now, of course, that file doesn't exist yet. By the way, we can get rid of everything in the public folder. We don't need that. We're gonna provide our own stuff here. And the easiest way for you to follow along is to visit the GitHub repository that I made for this project, and then go into the public folder and literally grab all the assets that are in here. Right, just grab the images, put them in your public folder. Right here, it's gonna be the easiest way to follow along. I've got this open here on my right-hand side monitor, so I'm gonna drag in all the stuff from the public folder that's also in the GitHub repository here on the right-hand side, put it in the public folder. So we have a bunch of images inside of here. Great. Let's give this a bit less space again. There we go. And if we save that, then we should be able to see that hopefully there is gonna be, if we put this into a side-by-side, the snake image. Well, right now there's not, but it's gonna be in a second when we create the heading. First off, let's give this image a class name, and that's gonna be a width of full. Okay, and now let's go below this div right here and actually create the main heading in h1 for our landing page. h1, there we go. And in here, we're gonna say your image on a, and then inside of a span element, right? Because we're gonna style this a bit differently, custom, and after the span element, we're gonna put phone case, right? We can already save that. Okay, that's on the page, great, but it doesn't look very nice yet. So let's give this h1 a class name, and that class name is gonna be relative. It's gonna be width of fit, a tracking dash tight, which if you're wondering what this is the letter spacing. So it's gonna be a bit closer together. It looks a bit nicer. It's gonna be text dash balance. It's gonna be margin top 16, font dash bold, and then exclamation point for important, right? Because we need to overwrite a default setting here. Is gonna be leading dash tight, a text gray of 900, a text of 5XL, and on medium devices and upwards a text of 6XL, and lastly on large devices and up a text of 7XL. Okay, let's format this, let's save this, let's see what happens on our page. Your image on a custom phone case. That looks a lot better already, right? But the custom, let's apply a custom class name to the span element that we created, and that's gonna be a BG green of 600, a padding X of 2, and a text dash white, and hit save. All right, that does look already a lot better. Beautiful. And below this h1 element, let's put a p tag. And this p tag is going to get a class name. And this one is going to be margin top of 8 to kind of space it out from the heading. A text of large, LG for large. On large devices, a padding right of 10. A maximum width of prose, which is like 65 ch, right? It's a good kind of width that Tailwind gives us out of the box for text, how wide it should be. A text dash center. On large devices, a text dash left, text dash balance, and lastly on medium devices a text dash wrap, and hit save. Now inside of this p tag, we're gonna say capture your favorite memories with your own, comma, and then inside of a span element, because we're gonna custom style this as well, 1 of 1. And the way we're gonna style this 1 of 1 text is going to be with a class name of font dash semi-bold, just to make it stick out a bit more. It looks a bit nicer. And then after the span, phone case. Case Cobra allows you to protect your memories, not just your phone case. And this is just some marketing stuff that I came up with, right? Maybe you want to change it. Is it the best? Probably not, but is it, does it look good on the homepage? I think it does. All right, beautiful. That looks very, very nice. And then after this p tag, let's create a UL, an unordered list, just like so. And this unordered list is going to get a class name of margin top 8, a space y of 2, a text dash left, a font dash medium, there we go, a flex dash col for flex column, an items dash center, there we go, and on small devices and upwards an items dash start. Beautiful. Inside of this UL element, let's open it up. We're going to create a div with a class name, and that's just going to be space y2 to vertically separate these. Now, inside of this div, let's create an li element, a list element. And this one is going to get a class name, and that's going to be flex, a gap of 1.5, an items dash center, and lastly a text dash left. Let's open up the div element, and inside of here, two things are going to happen. First off is going to be the text that we're advertising kind of. This one is going to be high quality, durable material. Right, let's hit save. Let's see what that looks like. All right, right here, great. That looks very nice. However, before that, we're going to add a check, which is going to be an icon. Now, there's a really nice icon library that I want to show you that we're going to use in this project, and that's lucid.dev. I use it in almost all my projects. It's great. It gives you beautiful looking icons out of the box. And we can install this icon library in another terminal, just like so, by saying npm install yarn add. Doesn't matter which package manager you use, lucid-react, and hit enter. That's gonna download the package for me because I use pnpm. Bada bing, bada boom. It's just gonna reuse what we already have. Or no, maybe I was wrong. Maybe it did download it. I don't know. Anyways, it's gonna add it to our project, so we can now import it right here from Lucid React. Beautiful. And this check is gonna get a class name, and that's gonna be a height of 5, a width of 5, a shrink of 0, so it should never be smaller than these values we put right here, the height and the width, and lastly a text green of 600, and hit enter. All right, that is already starting to look like something. Now, pro tip, if we mark this li element and hold shift alt and arrow down, bam, we can copy this entire element as it is down. And we're going to make use of that to just change the text to, for example, 5-year print guarantee. I think that's spelled guarantee. I think that's spelled correctly. It's a difficult word. Let's save that. Bam. There we go. 5-year print guarantee. Beautiful. Let's do that one more time. Mark it. Shift alt and arrow down. And then last one we're going to say is going to be modern iPhone models supported, and hit save on that as well. Beautiful. There we go. That's our kind of checklist section on the homepage. I think it really adds to the landing page. It's very clear to our users and what they're going to get if they order from our store. Very, very nice. After the UL element, let's continue. And we're going to continue with a div element, which is going to get a class name. And this one is going to be margin top of 12, a flex dash call on small devices, a flex dash row, an items dash center, on small devices and items dash start, and a gap of 5 to kind of separate them vertically. Awesome. Inside of this div, we're going to create one more div element, and this one is going to get a class name of flex and minus space minus x minus 4. You're going to see why right now. Let's open up this div, and inside of this div element, let's create a self-closing image tag, right? And this image tag is going to get two things. First off is going to be the class name, and this one is going to be inline-block, a height of 10, a width of 10, a rounded dash full, a ring of 2, and lastly a ring slate of 100. And then the second thing the image is going to get, you can probably imagine, is the src, the source. And this one is going to be /users/user-1.png. And if you want, just for accessibility reasons, we can also give this an alt tag. This is optional, but it does help visually impaired people, so it's generally a good practice to do. And that's going to be user image, for example. Let's hit save. Let's see what happens. Bam, there's a user image. But if you remember the demo at the very start, there were a lot more user images. So let's recreate that. And you already know the trick by now, right? It's Shift Alt arrow down. Bam, copy it down. This one is going to be user2.png, right? That makes sense. The next one, bam, let's copy it down, is going to be user3.png. Let's copy it down once again. Shift Alt arrow down. Bam. And this one is going to be user4, but not PNG. This one is going to be JPEG. There we go. And then one more time, copy it down. This one is going to be user5, also .jpeg and not .png. Man, that looks really nice already. And don't ask me why, right? It's because where I got these images, somewhere PNG, somewhere JPEG. Doesn't really matter. Same thing. And because the last image is a bit skewed, we can also apply an object-cover to fix that. It's going to look the natural proportions. Very, very nice. That is a super important section, and we're going to make it even better right now by going below the closing div and opening up one more div. And this one is going to get a class name, and that's going to be flex-call, a justify-between, items-center, and on small devices, items-start. And inside of this div, one more div element, and this one is going to get a class name of flex and also a gap of 0.5, just a little bit, you know. And inside of here, we're going to render out a star icon that we get from Lucid React or trusted icon library that I really, really like, by the way. And this one is going to get a class name. So the star element is going to get a class name of height 4, a width 4. It's going to be pretty small, a text green of 600, and a fill green of 600. There we go. And to make 5 stars, because that just looks much better on the homepage than 1 star, because nobody's gonna buy from you if you have 1 star, let's copy this down, Shift Alt arrow down once, twice, thrice, and 4-ice. I don't know. So we have 5 stars, you know. That's the idea here. Nice, that already looks very good. And now below the closing div after the stars, let's create a p tag right here. There we go, p tag. And inside of this p tag, we're gonna say, first off, we're gonna put a span element, and that's gonna contain 1250 or any amount of customers that you have, right? That's gonna change later, of course. We're gonna leave it like that for now. And this span is gonna get a class name of font-semi-bold. And then the rest of the p tag, not the span, is gonna say happy customers and hit save. Beautiful, 1250 happy customers. Well, that looks a lot more trustworthy if you ask me. Beautiful. And do you remember the cool little phone that was right there, bam, on the hero section in the demo? Well, that's what we're gonna create right now. And we're gonna do that right here above the closing of the max width wrapper. So leave all the divs behind, we don't need them anymore. Right above the max width wrapper, let's create a new div with a class name. And that's gonna be a call span full. On large devices, a call span 1, a width of full, a flex, a justify-center, a padding x of 8. On small devices, a padding x of 16. On medium devices, a padding x of 0, a margin top of 32. On large devices, a margin x of 0. On large devices, a margin top of 20. And lastly, a height of fit. Let's open this div up and one more div inside of here with a class name, and that's gonna be relative. And on medium devices, that's gonna be a maximum width of XL. And inside of this div, we're gonna create a self-closing image, as always, right? And the source for this image is gonna be /your-image.png right there. And the class name for this image is going to be absolute. It's gonna be a width of 40, on large devices, a width of 52. A left of 56, a minus top minus 20 to kind of move it upwards, a select-none, so users are not able to select it using their mouse, a hidden, on small devices, a block. On large devices, we're gonna hide it again by applying a large hidden, and lastly on XL, we're gonna apply a block once again. Now this image in and of itself won't look very good on the landing page. We can save that, see what happens. Probably not a lot is gonna happen because this is hidden anyways. And right now you'll see that this doesn't really appear. By the way, there is our snake, very nice. This won't appear because right now it doesn't have the space that it needs to show. We're gonna fix that right now. Below this, we're gonna create an image, self-closing, and this one is going to get a source of /line.png. And a class name, and the class name is going to be absolute, a width of 20, a minus left minus 6, a minus bottom minus 6 as well, and a select dash none. Beautiful. And below these two images comes the actual phone that we want to show on the landing page, right? And that's actually going to live inside of a custom component that we're going to call phone to make it reusable in a lot of places. And that phone is going to be self-closing. And let's create that component because of course it doesn't exist yet. We're gonna create it in our source folder under components, create a new file called phone.tsx. And as always, and by the way, we can close the sidebar, that's gonna be an arrow function. Const phone is gonna be equal to an arrow function that we export default at the bottom, export default phone. Beautiful. And inside of this phone, we're gonna return at the top level a div element. And this div gets a dynamic class name, just like our max with wrapper. Remember what we did there? Well, we're gonna do the same thing here by importing our cn helper function. And by default, we're gonna apply a relative, a pointer events none, which makes the user unable to interact with it with their mouse because it would be distracting, a z of 50, so the z index, and an overflow dash hidden, so nothing shows beyond the boundaries of this component. And then we're also going to apply the class name to merge with, right? And if you remember what we did in the max with wrapper, well, we're going to do the same thing here. We're going to receive a class name as a prop, and that is going to be typed, well, not inline, right? We could type this inline as we did with the max with wrapper. If you remember, we just defined the type right there. We're not going to do that in the phone case because we're actually going to receive multiple props. So let's name this phone props and define this as an interface right up here. Interface phone props. And we're going to extend this interface, extends, by something called the HTML attributes, which is a type that we can import from React that takes a generic in these brackets right here. And that's going to be an HTML div element, right? And that's a built-in type. We don't need to import that. And then what we're going to receive as custom props are two things. The image source, img-src image source, that's going to be a string, and a dark mode, which is optional, which is why we're putting a question mark. And this can be a Boolean if it is even passed. Now, I'm going to explain what this does here in a second. Don't worry if you've never used this kind of extension before. It's going to be very clear. First off, let's already import the most important props in our phone. So let's destructure the image source, the class name. Let's set the dark by default to false, and we can receive all the other props that this component takes right here, ... props, just like so. Now, what is this kind of syntax right here? The extends HTML attributes, right? Let's say, for example, we imported the phone right here on our landing page, the component, right? Now you can see, well, it receives a lot of props. And these are exactly the props that any HTML div element, right? That's what we specified right here, can take. So we can override the styles just like we were using a div, which makes this component very nicely reusable. Right, that's the entire point of doing this. We could, of course, just leave this away, but then we won't have, like, let's say we left it away, right? Just for demonstration, you don't need to follow along right now. Well, bam, there are way less props we can now pass in. We can't style it just like a div anymore. You see, that's the point of what we're doing right here. I think it's very important that you understand why we're doing what we're doing. And then let's spread in all the props as if we were styling the div, just applying them to the top level div right here. Into the div, so they are actually applied, right? And inside of this div, we're gonna create a self-closing img tag, oops, and that's gonna get a class name, and the class name is gonna be pointer events none, a z index of 50, and a select dash none as well. And the source for this image right here is gonna be, well, it depends, right? If the dark mode is passed as a prop, let's do a check. In that case, we're gonna use the /phone-template phone-dark-edges.png. And in the other case, when the light mode is activated, we're gonna say /phone-template-white-edges.png to use as the source. Beautiful. As the alt tag, which is just again generally a pretty good idea, we're gonna say phone image, and below the self-closing image, let's create a div element. This one is going to get a class name of absolute, a -z -10 to move it into the background, and an inset of 0. And we're almost done with our phone component. Let's open up the div, and in here is going to be a self-closing image with a class name of object-cover. And lastly, the source for this image is going to be the img src, the image source that we're passing into a prop into this phone component. Now the alt tag can be anything you want, for example, overlaying phone image, right? And again, this is just for visually impaired people. It's not that important. Or if your image doesn't load, if the internet connection is bad, then it's going to show the alt tag, but generally it doesn't matter as much. Let's save the phone. We are done here, and you're going to see what this looks like. It's going to be very, very cool. So let's navigate back into our main landing page. And now we need to pass this two things. First off is going to be a class name. Well, we don't need to pass it, but it will look much better. And this is going to be a width of 64. And what we do need to pass is the image source, right? And that's going to be /testimonials/1.jpg, which is an image I have prepared for you to use. Save that, and wabam, there it is. How cool is that? And here's the kicker, right? If we now go into full screen, bam, your image appears right there. The snake appears up there. How nice is that hero section? I think this is a really clear, really nice hero section with social proof, with the advantages of our service, with a demo of our service, and that just looks really nice. Okay, very, very nice. So next up is gonna be our navbar, because it's really important for how well the site looks and also for user navigation, of course, right? And we're gonna create that navbar inside of our components as a new file. Let's create a navbar.tsx. There we go. Okay, we can close the sidebar, and the navbar is of course gonna be an arrow function. Const navbar is gonna be a self-closing function. And let's export default navbar at the very bottom. Great. Now, as the top level element in the navbar, that's a convention. You're going to use the nav HTML element. It's literally made for being a navbar, right? So it just makes sense to use this one. And this one is going to get a class name of sticky. Let's give it a z index of 100. There we go. We want it to, be above all the rest of the elements. A height of 14. An inset x of 0, a top of 0, a width of full, a border -b for bottom, a border gray of 200 to kind of separate it from the rest of the page, a background -white /75. So the /75 is the opacity, right? If we remove this and then take a look at all the options there are, you can see there's a lot of options for opacity, and that's what the /75 means. A backdrop -blur -lg, and that's gonna look really nice when we scroll over other content, because it's gonna blur the stuff under it. It's gonna look very professional. And lastly, a transition -all for the nav element. Now let's open this up, and we're gonna use a component that we've already done, and that's gonna be our max with wrapper, and we can probably auto import it. Yes, there we go, perfect. And by reusing this one, we can make sure that the width is going to be the same as our actual page content. That's very, very helpful. And inside of here, we're going to create a div element, and this one is going to get a class name of flex, a height of 14, an items -center, a justify -between, a border -b, and lastly a border zinc of 200. That's already it. Let's open this up, and in here create a link element that comes from next/link. And this one is gonna get an href, and that's gonna be the slash. So this is gonna lead to our home page. And it's also going to get a class name, and this one is gonna be flex, a z of 40, and a font -semi-bold. There we go. And let's open this link element up. That's basically just an anchor tag under the hood, right? It's just the kind of Next.js way of doing this. And inside of here, we're gonna say case, and then inside of a span element, It's gonna get a class name of text green 600. We're gonna say Cobra. Perfect. And that's gonna be our kind of logo, you know? So let's already take a look at what this looks like if we put it on our live page. And the question is, where do we put that on our page, right? Do we do it in our landing page? Do we put it at the very top right here? The answer is no. In Next.js, there's something called a layout under source/app, or if we go to the kind of file system here, you can see that under source app layout.tsx. This is where we're gonna go, because the root layout, this one right here, is automatically generated by Next.js, and it will be visible for all pages in the entire application, right? So if we added, for example, the navbar here in the body, let's import the navbar as a self-closing HTML thing from components navbar. There we go. This is going to be visible in literally the entire application. Now, it says navbar cannot be used as a JSX component. And that's very probably because, yeah, we forgot to return the JSX in here. Of course, that's important. Let's save all of our files, the layout and the navbar, and then we should be able to see, yes, beautiful, the navbar popping up right here on our page. Very nice. And that's what the backdrop is for. As we scroll, you notice the stuff behind it is still lightly visible, right? Because we made it 75 opacity, and it's also kind of blurred behind the navbar. That's just a really nice professional looking effect that I want to show you that looks good on almost all pages. I use it a lot. It's a very, very nice effect. Awesome. Now below this link element and before the closing div, so still on side of it, let's open up one more div. And this div is gonna get a class name of height full, a flex, items dash center, and a space x of 4. And inside of this div, let's open this up. Well, we're gonna do a conditional check, and that is gonna be based on the login status of the current user. So we can show different stuff to users that are logged in versus users that are not logged in, right? For now, let's quickly mock that at the very top of the navbar. Let's say const user is equal to undefined. So let's just say a user wasn't there. We're going to implement this together in a second. Don't worry. Just for now, so we can write the logic for this already. That's a really good way. Without implementing the actual functionality, you can kind of mock it out, kind of pretend that the user is not logged in, and then implement the actual functionality here in a second. So we're going to do the check that I told you about, and that's going to be if the user is logged in. In that case, we're going to return some JSX. Let's just wrap that in parentheses for now. And in the other case, we're also going to return some JSX. Now, what are we going to return if the user is logged in? At the top level, well, we're going to return a React fragment, which is basically not a DOM element. It just allows us to put multiple children at the same level. And these are going to be link elements that we get from Next.js. Let's mark that and then import it. Wait, did we already import the link? Oh, we did. Okay, perfect. So the href that this link is going to get is going to be a string, and it's going to lead to /API/auth/logout, right? Because if the user is logged in, then we want to offer them an option to log out again. I think that makes sense. And the class name that this link is going to get is going to be dynamic. Now, there's a really cool thing I want to show you coming from our UI library that allows us to make this link look good without doing pretty much anything ourselves. And in order to do that, let's open up our terminal. I'm going to clear this here. And let's say npx shadcn-ui, so our UI library, add latest, so it uses the latest version of it, and then add button, right? And hit enter. That's gonna install a button component inside of our application that looks good and is fully accessible out of the box. And the cool thing is we don't have to use the button itself, but we can also only use the button variants from UI/button where I just installed our component, right? Which is a function we can invoke. This takes an object, and we can pass multiple things in here, like the class, the size, and the variant. We're gonna pass the size, and this is gonna be SM for small. You can see there's a couple of options here. Oops, there's a couple of options. Normally this should be type safe. Why doesn't this work? That is weird. Okay, anyways, and the variant is going to be ghost. Oh, and I think I know why this doesn't work, because we have a syntax error right here. Let's put a fragment instead of the parentheses, and then why doesn't this work? That is weird. Should I? Okay, sometimes if TypeScript doesn't work, you can just reload your window, by pressing Shift, Control and P, and you can hit developer reload window, and sometimes that fixes things, but apparently it didn't. Very weird. Normally it gives you TypeScript IntelliSense because these are the sizes that are allowed, and TypeScript should know about that. Right now it doesn't work. I'm not sure why, honestly, but as long as we pass the size of small and the variant of ghost, we are totally fine to go. Anyways, inside of this link, let's say sign out. This is gonna log the user out later as soon as we implement the authentication. And then we're gonna copy this link element down using Shift, Alt, and arrow down, bam, just like we did before. And this time we're gonna wrap it inside of curly braces to make it dynamic. And we're gonna do a check. And we're gonna check for a property called isAdmin. And if the person is an admin, in that case, question mark, we're gonna render out the link element, and else we're gonna render out null. This is how we achieve the secret admin dashboard button that I showed you in the very beginning. And of course, also we need to mock this out for now. Const isAdmin is gonna be set to false at the very top of the navbar, and we're gonna implement that together in a second. Very nice. So that's gonna be the dashboard button. Let's say dashboard in here. And if we want, we can also use a sparkles emoji. That's what I did in the demo at least. No, let's not do that. And copy and paste the sparkles emoji in here. I just think it looks kind of nice, but of course we don't have to do it. It's just a nice little detail that we can do. And lastly, we're gonna copy this link element one more time and paste it below the ternary check. And this is gonna be our call to action, right? So this is gonna be the button for create case. And the href for this API link is gonna be /configure/upload, because that's gonna be the first step in our configurator, right? In the 3 steps to make your own phone case, this one is gonna be the URL for the first step that the user is gonna be led to. And below the text, create case, we're gonna create an arrow right icon that we get from Lucid React. This is gonna be self-closing and with a class name of margin left 1.5, a height of 5, and a width of 5. Beautiful. And let's remove the variant of ghost. We want this to be a primary button, a big colorful button, right? And instead we're gonna pass a class name. And this class name for this button is going to be hidden, small flex, items-center, and gap-1. There we go. Oh, and of course this also needs to be an object format, so not an equal sign, but instead a colon right here. Beautiful. Okay, very nice. And we can copy the entire fragment that is rendered if there is a user from the ternary check to the end, right, that we just wrote. Copy the entire fragment, and let's paste it in the other case as well. And by doing that, we just save ourselves a bit of writing work, right? So we can just kind of change these up right now. So if there is no user in the case we're handling now, we want to offer them an option to sign in, right? But also an option to sign up first. If they don't have an account, we want them to be able to make an account. And that is going to happen at /API/auth/register. That's where they can make their account. And we're going to get rid of the isAdmin check completely. Nothing is going to happen in that case. The second link we're going to have in the case there's no user is going to lead to the /API/auth/login, right? And the class name, of course, is going to be the same as the sign up button. We don't want it to look differently. So we're going to replace this entire class name we had from above with the first link element. So it looks the exact same right here. And in case of sign up for the first link, the second one is going to say login, right? If we save that, we should already be able to see what happens. Let's give this a bit more space. There we go. Sign up and login. That looks very nice. However, we don't want the right arrow inside of the login button. That just looks a bit weird. Instead, let's create a visual separator right below the second link. This is going to be a self-closing div element with a class name of height 8, a width of px, which is just a single pixel. If we hover over it, 1px. Very nice. A background zinc of 200, a hidden, and on small devices, a block. And then the last thing is we can simply copy and paste the create case link down from the first kind of ternary check here and paste it below our visual separator and then hit save. Very nice. Let's see what happens. Oh yes, this already looks very good. Sign up, login, then the visual separator, and then we have the, let me zoom in so you can see this easier, the create case button right here. That looks beautiful. And by the way, little pro tip, right now this button is black. In the demo I showed you it was green, right? It was the primary color of this website. How do we do that? Do we have to manually go in and change all the colors? No. In our UI library, there's a tab called Themes, right? Under ui.shadcn.com. And in here, bam, if we head over to Themes, we can simply choose any theme by clicking Customize, then selecting any color that you want. Basically, you don't have to go with the green that I'm gonna choose right now. You can go for any other color. It doesn't really matter. And then we can click Copy Code right here. Copy everything. That's gonna give us all the CSS values for that color you just chose. And if we now go back into our project right here, give this a bit more space into our globals.css, then we can replace all the CSS stuff, the dark and the light, up until the add layer base, don't include that, and just hit Ctrl V to paste that in. If we now go back into our app and give this a bit more space, then we can see the default color for all the stuff has changed, for example, for the button. And that's just a really nice little feature of our UI library to make our app look that much nicer. Now, how cool would it be if these buttons actually did something, right? If users could sign up and log in already. And the answer is actually, it's really easy to get working authentication up and running in literally minutes, right? And that's where the sponsor of this video comes in, which is Kind, an auth for modern applications provider. And they're very kindly sponsoring this video. And I'm really happy they do, because these videos, like real talk, they're a ton of work to make. Like they take really, really long, like 100, 200, even sometimes 300 hours, like all the recording, code preparation, everything around it, it takes so long. And if you want to say thanks, right, for this video, there's going to be a link in the description that's going to lead you to their website through my link. So they know that you came from me. And who knows, man, maybe they want to work with me again in the future so I can keep making these videos. If you do, big thanks, right? If you visit the website through the link, big thanks. Of course, you don't have to, right? Yeah, you can just type in kind.com if you want to follow along right now. But if you do click, then they know that you came from me. It's like a tracking link that includes a parameter that has Josh in it. So they just know you came from me. And if you do, again, a very big thank you if you click that. And who knows, man, maybe they want to keep working with me. Okay, so what we're gonna do for the authentication, it really just takes 2 minutes to set up. I really like this, is we're gonna log in with Google, with GitHub. It doesn't really matter, whatever is easiest for you. Or you can also just choose your email and they're gonna mail you like a link that you can use to log in. I'm gonna land on my admin page because I already have an account with them and I already use them. If you've never worked with Kind before, chances are you don't have that. In that case, let's create a new business together. We're gonna walk through it step by step and we're gonna create a new business right here. So basically what that's gonna allow us to do is enter a name. And then once we did that, it's loading right now. It's gonna give us all the credentials that we need to make authentication work in our app. As the business name, let's use Case Cobra. And I'm gonna use -dev because I might have already used the Case Cobra name. But in your case, you can just leave it as Case Cobra. That's gonna give us the Kind domain. Number of employees doesn't really matter. And I'm gonna choose Europe, Ireland region because that's closest to me. And you can choose the one that's closest to you. And then let's hit save. Oh, and that can only contain letters or numbers. Let's say Case Cobra 1 in my case, and then hit save. Beautiful. That created our business right up here. And then let's click the casecobra1.kind.com. Maybe I already claimed the name by naming it that. Maybe you have to name it Case Cobra 2 or 3 or something. But it doesn't really matter what you name it, right? It really doesn't matter. And let's click, I want to start a project from scratch. And then let's hit next. As the tag we're going to use, it's going to automatically forward us to the documentation. We're going to choose Next.js. Let's hit next right here. And then you can select which authentication kind of methods you want, like Google, Facebook. And then you can already preview your sign-in form right here. I'm just going to leave it as email. It's the most straightforward. If you want to offer Google, just check it right here. Very, very easy. And then let's hit next. Beautiful. Okay. Very nice, almost there. Finish setting up your project and we're gonna say connect to your Next.js codebase and hit connect right here. And that's gonna basically walk us through step by step on how to do this. And honestly, it couldn't be easier. This is by far my favorite part of Kind. It's very easy to set up. And I'm not saying that because they sponsor me. I've used this before and it just takes like 2 minutes. I'm gonna show you. So we can copy the NPM link, the NPM package name that we need to install. And let's quickly clear our screen. There's a lot going on here. Let's close out of that. And then let's say pnpm or npm install add kind OSS kind auth Next.js, which they give us here in the dashboard. We can just paste that name in. That's gonna install all of the stuff that is needed, and then we can already grab the environment variables. That's gonna be super helpful. Let's click copy right here, and that's gonna be something like the issue URL, the site URL that we're running our app on, which is localhost 3000. And then once we deploy our app, which we're also gonna do in this video, no worries, and we're gonna change this to the deployment URL later. Right, for now, let's go into our VS Code. Let's close out of all of them and let's go into our sidebar right here and create a new file at the root of our project, and that's gonna be the .env file. By the way, we can already go ahead into our git ignore and type .env in here as well, just so when we deploy this later, we're not accidentally going to commit our .env file as well. Then we're gonna copy all the environment variables that kind gives us, simply paste them in this env file, and that's it. We're done, right? These are sensitive pieces of information like our secret or password, basically for the authentication. That's why we put it into a .env file, and that's it. We can close out of the env file. We're done here. Next thing we need to do is go and create this file right here. Under source, then that's gonna be app. Let's create a new folder in here called API. Inside of the API folder, a new folder called auth, and inside of the auth folder, a new folder called in angled brackets, which is a dynamic route, kind auth. So if you're wondering what the angled brackets are, that's a Next.js naming convention for dynamic API routes. And then let's create a new file in here called route.ts inside of the kind auth folder. We can simply grab what they give us, paste it in here, bam, we have authentication. Very, very nice. And that should already work, literally, right? We can start back up our development server, yarn dev. Let's close out of the sidebar, close, wait, why? Oh, did I start this in okay, I started my development server in 2 different terminals. That's not good. We already have the development server running, never mind. And then let's restart the page, and that's all. Oh, whoa, what happened here? Let's restart the development server, yarn dev. That should not happen. That looks very weird. 404 not found. Let's restart this. That should not happen. And then ideally, everything should look as before and the authentication should work, which we're gonna test together right now once this loaded. Boom, there we are. Okay, so let's see if this works. Let's click sign up. And hopefully our authentication is up and running. Let's see. Yep, that looks good. All right, first name, last name. Let's enter an email. I'm gonna choose hello@joshtriedcoding.com, and then let's hit create your account. That's gonna email me a code to my email that we entered. I'm gonna open up my email here on my second monitor, and then let's see the code that we have received. There it is, email verification code. We can simply copy over the code we have received in the email, paste it in here, and hit continue. Very nice, and then we should be logged into our application, and we should also see the user dashboard. Okay, now we are being redirected to /dashboard, which is a page that doesn't exist in our app, and that's probably because in the .env file it tries, the kind post login redirect URL, that's what it tries to redirect us to. Let's leave that at localhost 3000 because there is no dashboard page in our app, right? So once we log in, we're just going to be redirected to the dashboard. Very, very nice. And what this also now means is that we can get the current user session in our navbar where we are currently just mocking it out. Remember, if we go to the very top right here, you can see user is undefined. Well, that's not really true anymore. We can now actually get the logged in user session. And we can do that by destructuring something. Const empty object is going to be equal to get kind server, and we should already be able to import this. Yep, get kind server session from the kind npm package that we've installed /server. Very nice. And what we want to get from here is the get user function that we can now simply invoke. Const user is going to be equal to await get user, because this is an asynchronous function, and that's going to replace our previous mock that we did, right? And in order to be able to use await, we can mark the navbar as asynchronous, a React server component, so this runs on the server and not on the client, so we can securely get the user. right? And then the isAdmin check is going to be very simple. Let's say const isAdmin is going to be equal to user, which is optional, by the way. They might not be logged in, so question mark. Dot email is triple equal to process.env.admin_email. So the way the admin authentication works is we can go into our .env file and simply name the admin email. So for example, admin email is gonna be equal hello@joshtriedcoding.com. Or this is gonna be your email, right? Don't put my email here, put your email here. So you're gonna be your site admin, right? This can be any email you want. And as long as you're logged in with that email, well, you're gonna be recognized as the admin. As simple as that. So just like that, we have working authentication. You can see the state has changed. We can now sign out because we just logged in. If we hit that, let's see what happens. Well, we should be signed out, and we are, bam. We can now sign up again, we can log in again, or we can create our case. Dude, that is really cool. I'm so happy they're sponsoring this video. This is just nice. We got authentication working in like 5 minutes, right? And then if we go into our kind dashboard, let's go to home of our business, and then we should be able to see, yes, total users right here, 1, right? Because we now have 1 user, and the more people use your app, the more you're gonna see right here, along with their email, and you're gonna see the monthly active users and so on. Very nice. We can also see them in depth right here, by the way, if you want, under users, all users. You could even delete them if you wanted to do some manual testing and so on. That's where it happens in the kind dashboard. Very, very nice. Let's close out of the navbar because we're done here, and also out of the .env file. Now we can continue on our landing page to make it really, really good. I want to show you how to make an absolute killer landing page that, you know, hopefully converts very well, right? So people actually buy from your store. And in order for that to happen, one thing is very important, and that is social proof. So why should people buy from you? And that's exactly what we're going to create next. So with one closing div to go, and below the closing section on our main page.tsx, if you're wondering where we are, right here, this one right here, this page right here, under the closing section, this is where we're going to continue right now with, and let's just make a comment for ourselves here, right? Just so it's easier for us to see the value proposition section. So what value do we provide? How do we prove the value that we provide? And that's going to happen inside of a section element as well. The section is going to get a class name, and that's going to be bgslate of 100, and also a padding y of 24. Let's open this up and once again use our max width wrapper. Very, very handy component. Bam, just like that. And we're also gonna give it a custom class name. And that's gonna be flex, a flex dash call, an items dash center, a gap of 16, kind of space out the items, and on small devices a gap of 32. So a lot more. Inside of this max width wrapper, hard word to say, let's create a div element, and that's gonna get a class name of flex dash call, on large devices a flex dash row, an items dash center, a gap of 4, and lastly on small devices a gap of 6, so just a bit more. And inside of here we're gonna create an h2 element, a heading to element. There we go. Let's put that into view, and this is gonna say what or customers say. And this h2 is going to get a class name, and that's going to be an order-1. This is going to be important later because we're going to change the order of some elements. You're going to see what that does. A margin top of 2, a tracking dash tight, a text dash center, a text dash balance, a exclamation point for important, leading dash tight. So what we did on the main h1 way up here as well. Same thing we're going to do here for the h2. Then a font dash bold, a text of 5XL, on medium devices a text of 6XL, and lastly a text gray of 900 to make this very dark. Let's hit save. We can already kind of preview what that looks like. Let's scroll all the way down. There we go. What our customers say. However, the customers, we can make this look a bit better. And that's by wrapping the customers inside of a span element. And this span is going to get a class name of relative and a padding x of 2. And let's put the customer, just the customers, right? Nothing else in here. So afterwards it continues with say, but this allows us to style this word specifically a bit different. And we're gonna do this with a custom icon. And we're going to create this icon we're going to put into the customers, which is going to be like an underline, very nice looking underline for this inside of our components folder. Let's create a new file called icons.tsx. And this component is going to be very, very easy. Let's say export const icons, and this is going to be an object. This is not even going to be a normal React component, just an object. There we go. And in here, there's going to be something called an underline. This is going to be a function that receives some props, and these are going to be of type lucid props, which is a type that we get from our icon library that allows us to style the SVG kind of custom. And this is going to return directly a JSX element. And basically what it's going to return, you don't need to follow along right now. It's going to be an SVG, but just so we don't have to type out this SVG, there's no point in doing that. I prepared something for you called a copy paste list that contains all the stuff in this video that we don't need to type ourselves, like this SVG, right? Why would we type that? That's not realistic. Nobody does that. You grab these from websites and then put them into your app, right? You never type them. So we can simply copy and paste them to save ourselves some time. And if you notice, we're spreading in the props that we give in here. And the beautiful thing is, what these props allow us to do, right, is anywhere where we now use this icon, like in our main landing page, where we can now import the icons dot, and then we can say underline, which is a self-closing JSX element. Let's format this. We can now give this props, right? That's what it's for, these lucid props that we allow for the underline. So we can give this a class name of hidden. On small devices, we're going to say block, a pointer events none, so it doesn't interfere with the user mouse, an absolute, an inset x of 0, a minus bottom -6, and a text green of 500. And hit save. Let's see what that looks like. Hopefully, if we go into like a big screen, there we are. Beautiful underline that is not distracting on small devices. Mainly because if there's text under the customers and there's still the underline, it would look distracting. Whereas if it's on one line, it looks really, really nice with the underline. Perfect. That's exactly what the underline is for. Very, very nice. And now below the h2 element, we're going to create a self-closing img image element. And the source for this image is going to be /snake-2.png. The image, the freelancer that I mentioned in the very beginning, has prepared for us, and the class name is going to be a width of 24, an order of 0, and on large devices an order of 2. Right? So let's see what happens. Let's reload the page. What does this look like? Well, wabam! There is our snake, what the freelancer has drawn for us to make this project, and what the ordering does, right? I need to scroll down a bit here. The order 0 or order 2, that is basically for making the snake on top versus on the bottom, right? Normally it would be below the text, because in the HTML it is below the text, but we want it to be above the text when it's actually rendered out, because it looks so much nicer, and that's what the order is for. And if we go into big full screen, then you're going to notice that the snake is actually on the same level, and I just think this looks so nice. Awesome. Okay, so let's give this a bit less space and let's continue. Below the image and below the closing div and above the max width wrapper is where we're going to continue. Let's create a new div element right here, and the class name is going to be mxAuto grid maximum width of 2xl, a grid calls 1, a padding x of 4, on large, a margin x of 0. On large devices, a maximum width of none. On large devices, a grid calls of 2. And lastly, a gap y of 16 for some vertical separation. Let's open this div up, and inside of here, let's create one more div. This one gets a class name of flex, flex-auto, a flex-call, gap of 4. On large devices, a padding right of 8. And on extra large devices, a padding right of 20. Let's open this up, and inside of here, one more div element with a class name, and that's going to be flex, gap of 0.5, and a margin bottom of 2. And inside of this div, we're going to create a star icon that we get from our trusted UI library. We've already imported that into this page because we already used it in the hero section, remember, right here? So we can just reuse that, and the class name for the star icon is going to be height 5, with 5, a text green of 600, and fill green of 600 as well. And then holding Shift, Alt, and arrow down, we can copy it down once, twice, thrice, and 4 whatever, you know. So we have 5 stars once again, can already save that, see what it looks like. Let's see. Right here. Okay, there's 5 stars. That looks good. And now comes the first user testimonial, right? So below the closing divs of the stars with 2 closing divs to go, let's create one more div here. And the class name is going to be text of large and leading -8. There we go. Let's open this up. And inside of here goes a p tag, a paragraph element. And in here, we're going to say in quotes, the case feels durable, and I even got a compliment on the design. Period. Had the case for 2.5 months now, and now in a span element, right? We're gonna say the image is super clear. So we kind of highlight this point or this part of the user review. And then after the span element, we're gonna say comma on the case I had before, the image started fading into yellowish color after a couple weeks. Love it. Now, is that a real user review? Hell no. I made this up, right? But in a real world shop, of course, you're going to use a real user review here. This is just a kind of, well, I just wrote it to make it look good. But of course, you can probably imagine that this should be real in your actual shop. Now, the span element in here is going to get a class name, and that's going to be padding 0.5, a BG slate of 800, and a text of white. Let's hit save and already see what this looks like. All right, we can see it right here. Very, very nice. And below the closing p tag, below the closing div with 2 closing divs to go, we're going to create one more div right here. This will get a class name of flex, a gap of 4, and a margin top of 2. And inside of this div, we're going to create a self-closing image element. The class name of this image is going to be rounded full, a height of 12, a width of 12, and object-cover. And the source for this image is going to be /users/user-1.png, right? And then of course you can put an alt tag, let's just say user, right? And then below this self-closing image, let's create a div with a class name, and that's going to be flex and flex-col, so we can sort this vertically, with a p tag inside of here that's going to say Jonathan, which is going to be the user name that wrote this review. And the p tag is going to get a class name of font-semi-bold. And below this p tag, we are going to create a div element. This one is going to get a class name of flex, gap 1.5, a items-center, and a text zinc of 600. Now, inside of this div, we're almost done, by the way, comes a check, which is a icon we get from Lucid React, right? We already used it way up here in our landing page as well. That's the check. We're going to reuse it down here. So this is going to be self-closing, the check icon, with a class name of height of 4, width of 4, a stroke, and then in angle brackets for a custom value. That's going to be 3px for 3 pixels. And lastly, a text green of 600 for the check mark. And below this is just going to be a p tag saying verified purchase. And this p tag is going to get a class name of text small. That's it. All right, let's format this file. Let's save this file. Let's see what it looks like. Bam. Jonathan, verified purchase, wrote this review. That looks absolutely beautiful. And because we want 2 user reviews and not just one, we can go ahead and grab this entire div element. And I have a shortcut to mark this entire div element in VS Code that is called emit balance outwards. That's what the shortcut is called. But we can also just do a little trick, fold everything here, grab the div with a flex, auto flex, col, gap 4, and so on, and just hit shift, alt, and arrow down. Bam, copy and pasting it down. And we can also make a little comment for ourselves right here, saying something like second user review, right above the code we just copied down, so we know what this is. And let's change this user review, right? We want a bit of different text. So before the span, we're gonna say, I usually keep my phone together with my keys in my pockets. And that led to some pretty heavy scratch marks on all of my last phone cases. Period. This one, comma, besides a barely noticeable scratch on the corner, comma, there we go. And now inside of the span element, so we want to highlight this part, looks brand, looks, we need to spell that right, looks brand new after about half a year. Then after the span element, we're gonna say period, I dig it. Awesome. And then just a period there and a quote to end this. And of course, just one quote VS Code automatically does too. Let's change the user image. This is gonna be user4 dot, not PNG, but dot JPEG in this case. And let's also change the name from Jonathan to Josh, or well, basically whatever you want. I just put my name here. You can put your name if you want. Just put your name right here. Hit save and let's see what happens. Bam, there is the second user review. Very, very nice with a different image. That looks amazing. Awesome. And now below this max width wrapper that we have for the review section is gonna come probably the coolest section of the entire homepage. And that is the animated reviews that I showed you in the very beginning. Remember those phones with the images that were beautifully animated on the homepage? That's exactly what we're gonna build together right now. And it's gonna happen inside of a div element below this max width wrapper. And this div is gonna get a class name of padding top of 16. And inside of here, we're gonna create a custom React component, and that's gonna be the reviews section. Now, of course, that's a component that's gonna be self-closing and that doesn't exist yet. So let's open our sidebar into our source folder and create a new file in our components folder called reviews.tsx. And if we take a look at this section conceptually, right, how will this looks like? Basically, we will have the entire section, right? Imagine this is the part of the homepage where this is gonna live. And we're gonna have a lot of phones in here in 3 different columns, right? So there's gonna be column 1, column 2, column 3, with each one slightly being offset, so it looks a bit nicer. There we are, and then they're gonna move, they're gonna move like upwards in the animation. So the question is, how do we kind of architect this conceptually? And I think we should go for a top-down approach, which means we make the large parts first and then drill down into each individual components. The alternative would be we start with the smallest part in here, like each phone, and then go ahead and construct a column and then go ahead and construct a grid. I think it's more intuitive if we start from the top down, where we start with the entire section, the entire review grid, and then go down smaller into the individual components. So let's do that. Sounds maybe a bit abstract, but you're gonna see it's actually very simple. So first thing we're gonna do, let's open this back up so we can see what we do in real time, is gonna be export function a reviews, right? So the main component that we want to import into our page.tsx. And this is gonna return or, well, max with wrapper that we already know. Let's import that in here. And this is going to get a class name of relative and a maximum width of 5xl. Let's open this up. Inside of here is going to be a image tag, self-closing. Once again, of course, the area dash hidden is going to be true. So we hide this for screen readers, just a nice little detail for accessibility reasons. The source is going to be slash what dash people dash are buying dot png, something I've prepared for us. And then the class name is going to be absolute select dash none hidden xl block minus left minus 32 and a top of 1/3. Let's format this so it looks nicer, and let's already save this and import this reviews component into our page.tsx to kind of see what it looks like, right? So if we give this a lot more space now, we should be able to see that. Hopefully, yeah, well, nothing really happens because we didn't code any component yet. But if we did, then we should be able to see the image also pop up, right? So the main component inside of the reviews is going to be the review grid. And that's going to be a component we're also going to define in the same file right here, because it's very closely related to this reviews main component. It's not something reusable, and it's not meant for that either. It shouldn't be reusable, right? It doesn't make sense. So let's define a function review grid up here. And that function, first off, is going to get a reference, a React ref. Let's call this the const container ref. And that's going to be equal to use ref, a hook that we get from React. And now, because in Next.js, these components by default are server-side components, in order to use React hooks like use ref, we need to mark this as a client-side component by putting use client at the very top of the file, first line say use client, and that makes us able to actually use React hooks and de-opt from the server-side rendering of this page. And we can also pass this userref a generic to tell TypeScript what the type will be. This will be an HTML div element. Right? That is a type we don't need to import or anything, it's already baked in. Or this could also be null, because we're going to initialize it as null, and once React actually sets the ref, then it's going to be the HTML div element. And this userref we can already attach to a DOM node. So we're going to return some JSX from this review grid, and that's at the top level going to be a div element. And that's where the ref comes into play. The ref is going to be the container ref, because this div is going to act as the container for the following entire review grid. Right? And the class name for this div is going to be relative, a -mx-4, a margin top of 16, a grid, a height of, and then in angled brackets for a custom value, 49 rem, a maximum height of, again, angled brackets, 150 VH for view height, right? So it doesn't exceed 150% of the current user viewport, a grid dash calls dash 1, items dash start, a gap of 8, an overflow dash hidden, a padding x of 4. On small devices, a margin top of 20. On medium devices, a grid calls of 2. And on large devices, a grid calls of 3. That's actually going to define these grid calls here, how many columns we have, how many columns of phones there are going to be scrolling by. Now, why do we have the container ref? What does it do for us? And the reason we have this is so when we scroll on the main page, and let's put this somewhere down here, this is just for this project, as we scroll, as the user scrolls, we only start animating this section once it's in the viewport, once the user sees it, right? We don't want to animate it before, otherwise the user didn't even see the animation. And in order to check if the animation is in the view of the user, we can use this container ref along with or probably one of the most popular React animation libraries, which is Framer Motion. So in our terminal, let's say npm install framer-motion, and that package gives us a really useful hook to check if something is in the viewport called use in view. So let's explore that together. Let's say const is in view is going to be equal to use in view, which is the hook we get from Framer Motion. Let's import that. And in here, we can pass the container ref. Simple, right? We now know if something is in the view of the user or not. However, we can also pass some options as an object right here. We're going to say once true, because if we didn't pass this, otherwise every time the user scrolled up and down, it would animate, but we only wanted to animate the first time the user scrolls. And the amount right here is going to be 0.4. This takes a number. This could also be sum, all, and so on. But I think 0.4 is a good in between here. It looks very, very nice. So it animates like when it's a bit past the user viewport. So it's already kind of in view of the user. And so it doesn't already animate when the user just sees 1% of it, because otherwise in that case, the user wouldn't really see the animation either. And now is the time to actually construct the 3 different columns. What do we want to show in the columns? And the answer is, well, we want to show images of phones, right? And to make this as easy as possible for ourselves, let's go to the very top of the file and declare a const phones in all uppercase, because that is a convention for declaring constant things across your application. You define them at the very top in all caps, so you know anywhere in code when you see stuff in all caps that this is a constant. It's not fetched by any API and so on. That's something I learned at my first developer job, and I think it's a really, really good idea for clarity in your code base, right? So I want to show you how it works. And then we're going to put some stuff in here, and that's just going to be strings, right? So this is going to be /testimonials/1.jpg, and this actually maps to a path in your public folder right here under testimonials, 1.jpg, 2.jpg, 3.jpg, and so on. These are the images on the phones that we actually want to display, right? And we can just mark this first string, hold Shift Alt arrow down once, twice, 4, 5, 6. Right? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Very simple naming convention here, and all separate them via commas. And that's all, right? These are just the images that we want to show on the phones in this section. So in our review grid, to actually construct the columns, we can just say const columns. And now basically the idea is that we want to split these phones into 3 different columns, right? How do we do that? Well, we can just use a little helper that we're gonna write ourselves called split array, which is a function that doesn't exist yet because we're gonna write it. And the ideal way in which we're gonna call this is we want to first pass the array that we want to split, and then secondly, how many columns we want to split this into. So in our case, that's gonna be 3, right? And in order to use this little helper, well, we have to write it. Let's define a custom function called split array, and that's literally all it does, right? It just takes an array and then splits the array in the number of parts that we pass it. So first parameter we want to accept is going to be an array, and this is going to be the TypeScript type of array, and we can pass this as a generic t. I'm going to explain what this does in a second, and then the number of parts we want to split this into, and that's going to be just a number, in our case, for example, 3. And then this function receives a generic, which is also going to be t, and all this does, right, is it checks this t generic right here. If we pass, for example, a string array, then this t is going to be a string, this generic is going to be a string, and that might sound a bit abstract if you've never worked with any kind of TypeScript generics before, but essentially what this allows us to do is to enforce type safety in this function. So we can say const result is going to be of type array, and this takes a generic, which is going to be another array, and in here we can pass the t generic. So basically we don't know what kind of array that we put in here, but whatever kind, in our case, for example, string, or this could also be a number array, right? Whatever kind, that's going to be saved in the t, and we can store that to make the result here type safe. And that's going to be an empty array to initialize it, right? So all we're saying is we're going to have an array of, in our case, strings, but the function doesn't know, it doesn't care. That's what the generic is for. Strings, this could be numbers, then the t would be number, doesn't matter, because essentially we're going to have a 2-dimensional array, right, of columns, right? These 3 columns right here, and each column will then have certain rows, right? So it's going to be 2-dimensional columns, rows of strings, of paths, right? Which could also be number. That's exactly what the generic is for. So when you think about it, it's not actually that complicated, but I admit, yes, if this is the first time you're using TypeScript generics, then it might seem a bit abstract, but that's a really good way to enforce type safety. And inside of here, we're going to create a for loop. Now VS Code automatically provides us a nice snippet to do that. And the iterator we're going to name I. This is going to go to the array.length, array just being the parameter that we accept in the function. And the first thing we're going to do is say const index is going to be equal to I. And then the modulo operator, so what's left from a division, that's the modulo operator. And we're going to do that with the num parts, right? So we're going to divide, and then what is left from that. And oh, this needs to be named index. And if we don't have a result at index, we can use the bracket notation to do that. If we don't have a result index, in that case, the result at index, so in our case, just the modulo, what's left from the division, is going to be an empty array. And else, in that case, we're going to say result at index dot push. And what do we want to push? Well, the array at current I. And then after the for loop, we're just going to say return result. So basically the array that we've been pushing into, right? You know, right here, or that we have been clearing. So basically all we're doing here is splitting an array into a certain number of parts. I think that is pretty straightforward if you're familiar with any kind of computer science basics, right? So we take an array of strings, for example, or number array, doesn't really matter. The generic does account for that, and we split it into 3 parts. So what we expect to get back is an array, a 2-dimensional array of columns and rows. And if we hover over the columns, we can see that's exactly what we get back. Beautiful. To actually get access to the columns directly, very simple. We can say const column1 is going to be columns at the index of 0, because arrays are 0 based. Const column2 is going to be columns at the index of 1. And of course that needs to be equal to, there we go. And then the const column3, so the third and last one, is going to be equal to split array. We're going to call that again. And then the columns at the index of 2, and we're going to split that into 2 parts. Okay, and I think this split array function was actually the most complicated part. And this, I'm not saying it's very complicated, but I think it was the most complicated part. From here on out, it's going to be easier, definitely. So now it's time for the fun part, to actually render out the reviews, right? And we can already do that by checking if this stuff is in the view of the user. So if is in view, in that case, we're gonna render out some stuff, and else we're gonna render out null because we don't want to animate anything if it's not viewed by the user, right? And if it is, in that case, we're gonna render out a React fragment, which is just allowing us to put some elements at the same level without rendering another DOM node for that. Okay, so what we're gonna render out in here is gonna be the review column, a component that doesn't exist yet. We're gonna create it together in a second, and this is going to be self-closing. Now, what is a review column? Basically, it's gonna be, let's go here, it's gonna be one of these columns containing multiple phone elements, right? That's all it does. And that's a component we can create, for example, right up here above the review grid. Let's create a function review column. There we go. And open that function up. Oops. There we go. Open that function up. Now, what is this going to receive as props? Well, basically 4 things. It's going to receive the reviews, which are the individual kind of, I guess we could also call it phone images, right? Each one of them is going to be a string. I guess originally this component, I kind of modified it from Tailwind CSS, was meant for customer reviews, but I modified it so it shows phones. You could also just name this phones, I guess. The class name, then the review class name, which is going to be a function. You're going to see that in a second here. That's going to be very cool. And then a milliseconds per pixel. How fast should these things even move? And by default, we can say 0. And to actually tell TypeScript what the hell is going on here, because it has no idea, right? Well, basically the reviews are going to be a string array. Then the class name is going to be optional. We don't have to pass it. That's going to be a string. The review class name is going to be a callback function, but it's also going to be optional, right? So we're going to put a question mark here as well. And it will basically take the review index, because the review class name is going to be dependent on the how many if review this is, right? Because if we're on small devices, we don't want to show 3 columns next to each other. We want to show them below one another. So basically we only have 1 column, right? In order to do that, we need to know what is the review index, and that's going to be a number. And this callback function is going to return a string. And then lastly, the ms per pixel, you can probably guess, is going to be number, and it's also going to be optional. So we're going to put a question mark here as well. Awesome. And I think this reviews component is going to be the most complicated component in this entire build, but it's also one that looks really nice. So I want to show you how to do it, you know. So inside of the review column, let's say const column ref, and you already know the drill by now how a ref works by using the useRef React hook, and we can also pass this the generic of what the type will be. So for example, an HTML div element, or we're going to initialize it as null. There we go. So by default, it's going to be null. And then once React has assigned the ref, it's going to be an HTML div element. And we can already do that assigning, by the way, by returning a div at the top level. And the ref of this div is, of course, going to be the column ref. There we go. The class name of this div is going to be dynamic, where we can basically use our CN helper function. Let's call that. And by default, we're going to apply an animate dash marquee, that's what it's called, the animation style that we're going for, a space y of 8 and a padding y of 4. And now also pass in the class name right here. So if we want to override this wherever we call the review column component, we can totally do so, because our CN helper function allows us to do that. Very, very nice. And then as the style, last thing this div will take, style right here, we're going to pass in an object. And this is going to be a string in which we're going to say dash dash marquee dash duration. How long will this animation take? And that's going to be something called the duration, a value that we haven't calculated yet, which we're going to do in just a second. And then we can cast the type of this to make TypeScript happy. That's going to be as react.css properties. There we go. Now the only problem is that it doesn't know what the duration is. Well, cannot find named duration. It doesn't know how long the animation should take. And the answer is, well, the duration kind of depends on how high the column is, right? Because if the column is way shorter, right, like this, can I move that down like this? Then of course the element should be twice as slow. Otherwise, it's going to be like way too fast right here, right? It would look very weird if we had the same speed every time and not respected how high the column actually is, right? Because if the column is half the height, then the element will be through the column. It will move from beginning to end twice as fast, basically. So the question becomes, how do we know how high the column is? And well, basically that's really easy. We can initialize a state for that. I think there's a useState snippet I have for that, but you might not have it. So let's type it out from scratch. That's going to be const and then an empty array. Let's name this column height and set column height by convention is going to be equal to useState, a hook that we can import from React. And by default, this is going to be initialized as 0 once this component renders. And because one thing that's important is the user can resize this window, right? On different devices, this window is going to be different sizes. And to account for that resizing, we can do that inside of a use effect and kind of listen to that resize event and then set the column height accordingly. Right? So let's create a use effect that only runs at the very beginning on the first render of this component by making the dependency array empty, right? It's only gonna run once. And we're gonna listen to resize changes of the column, right? So if we don't have a column ref.current, if React has not initialized the reference to this DOM node yet, in that case, well, we don't care. We're just gonna return early. No logic is gonna happen, right? But if we have that, we can use a really cool built-in API, and that is the resize observer. Let's call this const resize observer, and it lets us listen to changes of resizing actions, right? That's what it does. We can say new window.resize ob, and we should be able to see that right here. Resize observer, that's the API we're going to use, and it takes a callback function. So every time a resizing action occurs, we can listen to that and execute some logic inside of this callback function, right? So when this changes, what should we do? Well, basically, we're going to set the column height to the column ref.current.offset height. And we're going to say by nullish coalescence, just question mark, if this is undefined or null. In that case, we're just going to set it to 0, right? Because technically TypeScript thinks that this could be undefined. Well, it's really not, right? We've already done the check, but just to make TypeScript happy, we're going to say else this is going to be 0, right? So kind of the fallback value, if you will, but we kind of know that this will be defined, just TypeScript doesn't know it. Now, in and of itself, this would not yet work because while technically we created the observer, we're not using it, right? It's just there in memory unused. So we actually still need to say resize observer.observe. We can call that function on here. And what do we want to observe? The column ref.current, which is basically a link to this div right here. So basically we're saying with this resize observer, listen to changes in this div that we assigned the ref to. And now, important to avoid memory leaks, let's clean this up as well. In the return function of our use effect, inside of here, we want to say resize observer.disconnect and just call that function right here, just as a generally good practice to clean up after ourselves. Very nice. And now, because we always know how high the column is, we can change the speed of how fast these phones should move through the column accordingly. And that sounds more complicated than it is. It's dead simple. Let's say const duration is just going to be a template string, and that's going to be the column height that we dynamically insert into here using this kind of syntax for JavaScript template strings, and then times right here, the ms per pixel ms, because these are pixels, right? This is measured in pixels, the 0 and whatever we're setting it to when it resizes. And we can multiply it by the milliseconds we want per pixel, and that's the ms we get. Right, so that's going to be the duration. We can straight up pass into our style. And now this animate marquee is not actually a built-in animation in Tailwind, but it's something really simple we can add ourselves in the tailwind.config.ts. If you're wondering where that lives, it's right here at the root of our directory, right here, the tailwind.config.ts. And let's scroll down until we get to the animation section that is already right here at the bottom. The animation we're going to create is going to be the marquee animation. And this is going to be a string that's going to say marquee var dash dash marquee dash duration right here that we're setting dynamically. Remember what we're doing right here. That's what we're setting, this marquee duration, very nice. And this is gonna be linear infinite. Perfect. Okay, now let's comma separate them right here and also create that marquee animation that doesn't mean anything right now as a keyframe. So CSS actually knows how to handle this. This is very simple. Let's create a marquee right here. This is going to be an object, and at 100%, just like so, we're going to apply a transform property, transform, and that's just going to be a translate y of minus 50%. Right, so it kind of slides up from the bottom minus y of 50 to 0, just kind of nicely slides up and fades in. Very nice. Let's save that, and now let's hover over the animate marquee. And ideally, let's reload our window. Maybe that will work. Ideally, if we hover over this, we should be able to see that this now actually applies some kind of class name under the hood. And there we are. Tailwind now recognizes this animation as something that we have created, and that is exactly what we want. Awesome. And for each review column, of course, in each column, we want to show the individual elements, the individual reviews, right? And the way we do that is by saying reviews that we pass in here as an argument, right? Dot concat, and we're going to concatenate it with the reviews again, just so we have more stuff to show, right? If we don't have a lot, then, well, we just duplicate them as they are, and then we have more stuff to show in each column. That's all we're doing here. And then we're going to say dot map, and for each image source and the review index that we get right here, let's render out, or actually let's render out some JSX directly. So we're going to wrap this in parentheses, and the component that we're going to use here is going to be called review, right? That's going to be one individual component that we're going to put right here. This is going to be a self-closing component, and it's also a really simple component that, by the way, does not exist yet. So let's just create it right here under the review column. Let's create a function review. Let's open up this function, and the properties that this review will receive, we can destructure right away here in a second. Let's call these properties the review props, which is an interface. We can define right above there. Let's scroll down a bit, interface review props. And this once again extends the HTML attributes. There we go. We need to import that from React of an HTML div element, which basically just allows us to pass any prop that a normal React div would also take, right? As I showed you before. And the custom prop we're going to extend this with is going to be the image source, which is just going to be a string. So what that allows us to do is to destructure all the props that any div would normally take, along with the image source, the custom one that we just added, right? And we're also going to destructure the class name, and the rest we're going to receive as the props. We're just going to spread them in as is into the top level div. And let's do that, by the way. We can return a div at the top level, spread in all the props, and this, by the way, is always the last thing that we do inside of the div, because this actually overrides stuff. So if we passed the dot 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 props, but passed any prop that involves again, then these are overriding because they involve the same thing, right? If it's defined here, the area busy, and here, then of course we're overriding this. So this is generally the last thing that you do. Right, so we're going to define a class name before that. And this class name is going to be dynamic. It's going to use our CN helper function. And by default, we're going to apply animate-fade-in, a rounded dash, and then in angled brackets for a custom value 2.25 rem. And that's just a value that I found looks very good with the phones that we're going to put in here. And by the way, we can also open up our main page so we can see what we're doing in more real time. A BG of white, a padding of 6, an opacity of 0, a shadow of XL for extra large, and a shadow of slate 900/5. So a very light kind of black shadow with an opacity of 5 that we're applying here. And we're going to merge this together with the class name that we can pass into this review as a prop right up here. Okay. Very, very nice. And now we also want to give each review an animation delay, so they kind of pop in at different times, right? When we scroll into this, not all the columns pop up at the exact same time, but first the middle and then kind of the others. And it's kind of randomized on how they pop up, so it looks really, really nice at the end, right? And the way we do that is very simple. We can first define a couple of possible animation delays. Let's say const possible, and then in all uppercase, by the way. animation delays, because this is a constant array. And in here we can put, for example, 0s for 0 seconds, 0.1 seconds, 0.2 seconds. Let's also put 0.3 seconds, 0.4 seconds, and one last one, let's do 0.5 seconds. There we go, right? So this is all the possible delays there are. And the actual const animation delay that we're gonna use is gonna choose any random one of these possible delays. So we can simply say possible animation delays at the index of math.floor. And in here we can pass math.random, invoke that times the possible animation delays.length. So basically all this part means the math.floor, math.random is choose any random number between these that are possible, right? So at the end, what we're left with is the string animation delay, which is gonna be any random one of the possible ones. Very nice. And we can simply pass that in as a style property inside of our div right here. So we can say style is gonna be equal to an object and simply pass in the animation delay right here, because that's a property that CSS actually recognizes. Very, very nice. And then inside of this div, what do we actually want to animate? Well, it's each individual phone with a background image, right? And we already have the component for that. We already wrote the phone component, which is awesome because we can now simply use it right here for each review and then pass it just the image source that it takes as a prop, which is our img src or image source. Now we're gonna get two errors here. One is gonna be for the review column, right? Because each review expects properties that it doesn't get right now, and we need to pass it those properties. First one is going to be a key, because we're mapping over something. In React, we always need to pass a unique identifier to the most top level element that we're mapping over, right? And this is going to be the review index. The class name we're going to pass into our review is going to be dynamic, and that's going to be the review class name, which might not exist, right? It's an optional prop that we receive for each column. We can see that by the question mark here, it's optional. That is why if it is present, only then are we going to invoke it. That's what this syntax is good for. Only if it's passed, then we're going to invoke it. And we're going to invoke it with the review index modulo the reviews.length. There we go. And then the last prop we're going to pass in here is the image source that it absolutely expects. We need to pass that, and we already have access to that as a prop in this component as well, which is the image source. Beautiful. So we completely got rid of that error, and then we get one more error, and that happens down here in our actual review grid. So basically, each review column expects a couple of properties. For example, the reviews, but we've already done all the work that is needed for this to work. You remember the columns we split this into? Well, that's all the foundational work that we need to do. So as for the reviews, the first column, we're going to spread in the column 1. We're going to spread in the column 3. And you might have noticed, because we calculate the column 3 a bit differently, this is not a normal string array like column 1 and column 2. This is actually a string array. So this is a 2-dimensional array, which is why we're also going to call the .flat method on here to make it a single array, like a 1-dimensional array, just like the others. And then we're going to spread in ... column 2. There we go. Those are going to be the reviews that we render out inside of this column. As for the review class name, what is that going to be? Basically, this is the callback function, remember, where we get access to the review index that we need in order to check what should be the class name that we apply to this. And to determine which class name should be applied based on the review index, we're going to make use of our cn helper function, which takes an object and makes this very easy. For example, we're going to apply the class name of medium hidden in the condition that the review index is larger or equal to the column 1.length plus the column 3 at the index of 0.length, right? In that case, we're going to apply a medium of hidden, and we're going to apply a large of hidden in the condition that the review index is larger or equal than the column 1.length. There we go. And now to achieve that really cool effect where the middle row actually moves faster than the side rows, which looks really nice in the end, we are going to apply a ms per pixel, what this accepts as a property of 10, to the first column. And once we copy and paste down using Shift, Alt, and arrow down this entire column, we can already change the ms per pixel to 15 on the middle row, right? Also, this will actually be slower, right? But same effect that I mentioned, it's gonna slide at different speeds, the outer columns versus the inner column. It's gonna look super, super nice, as you saw in the demo of this, right? And the class name we're gonna apply to this is gonna be, right? It's not gonna be the review class name, it's gonna be the standard class name. It's gonna be hidden, and on medium devices, we're gonna say block. And the review class name is going to be very straightforward. All we're gonna do is return the result of review index is larger or equal than column2.length. And in that case, we're gonna return a string of large hidden, and else we're gonna return an empty string. And last review column we're gonna put here. Let's copy and paste this down one more time using Shift, Alt, and arrow down. Oh, and by the way, before we care about the third column, let's fix the reviews that we want to show in the second column. This is not even going to be that much as in the first column. This is just going to be ... column 2. So we're spreading in the second column, and ... column 3 at the index, at the index of 1. There we go. And then the third review column, by far the easiest, right? We're simply going to use the column 3 dot flat. Again, to turn this from a two-dimensional array into a single-dimensional array, and we don't even need any array brackets in here. We can simply put it in as it is, right? That's it. And as the milliseconds per pixel, we're going to set 10, and we can completely get rid of the review class name. So what is up with these reviews, right? Why are these so different? Essentially, if we only show one column, right, we don't want to hide all other reviews and just show that single column, right? We still want to show all the reviews there are, but just as a single column. And that's exactly what the review class name and the reviews is for, right? If we only have one column, we only show this one. And in that case, we want to show all the reviews, but not if we're also showing the other columns, right? That's what we have these checks here for. So if all columns are visible, we only show column 1 content. And if this is the only column that we're showcasing because we're on mobile device, for example, just imagine it would omit like all the good reviews that are in the other columns. That would be horrible, right? We still want to show them just in this column now. And that's essentially the logic that we have right here. And that's why the logic gets less for each review column that we show. Because, for example, if we display 2 columns, then the second column only needs to carry also the reviews from the third column that is not visible anymore. And if we show all columns, then we don't even need to care about that. Very, very nice. Let's save that. And now let's see what happens. Let's start back up our development server. Let's hit yarn dev, reload our page to actually see what happens. And let's let this load. Again, the first time always takes pretty long to load, but let's give it a second. And then we should be able to see something pretty cool. Let's let it load, and hopefully everything works correctly. We're gonna see once this loads. So let's scroll all the way down. And where's the animation? Do I need to zoom out a bit? Okay, where's the animation? What's happening? Why? Oh, we get an error right here. What's the problem? Let's see, invalid DOM property fill rule. Ah, and interestingly, I know where the problem is, why the reviews are not showing. This error is not the reason. I think this comes from the icons that we pasted in. Do we have, yeah. So the fill dash rule should be changed to fill rule in or icons.tsx. That's just the reason of the error. It's not a big problem. It's just a tiny thing that React just does. The problem why we're not seeing the reviews actually lies in the fact that the animation, it's not one that is actually baked into Tailwind, but it's one we need to define ourselves. But it's really easy to define it. We're gonna go into our tailwind.config.ts. That's where this is gonna happen. By the way, we can get rid of the accordion animations. These are automatically done by our UI library, but we don't need them. And then the fade-in animation that we use right now is going to be a string of fade in, 0.5 seconds. It's going to be pretty quick, linear forwards. There we go. And then the actual animation is going to be defined right here in our keyframes, where we again can get rid of the accordion stuff. We won't need that. And then let's define the fade-in animation right here. So basically, this takes a from. The from is going to be an object with an opacity of 0. And, well, you can probably guess what this is going towards. We're going to animate to, and this is also going to be an object, opacity, and this is going to be 1. And these need to be strings, by the way, not actual numbers. There we go. So we have the from, we animate to, and that's already it. We can comma separate this from the marquee animation, save this, and reload our page to hopefully, yes, sir, there we go, to actually see the phones pop in and animate so nicely. Right, they only start animating once they're in the viewport. That's what the frame motion hook is for that we're using. So they're not animating right now, but only as we scroll down, they start popping in to the screen. That looks so nice, man. And to put the cherry on top, we can add even a little fade out and fade in at the very bottom right here to make the section really smooth into the rest of our page. So let's go into our review grid. Where is the review grid? Here it is. Let's go into the review grid component down to the very bottom, and then below all the review columns in the dynamic check, we're going to put a self-closing div right here. And this one is going to get a class name of pointer events none to not make it interfere with the user mouse, absolute, inset x of 0, top of 0, height of 32, bg gradient to b for to bottom, and a from slate of 100. And we can simply copy and paste this component down using Shift Alt arrow down. There we go. Change the top to a bottom and change the BG gradient to B to BG gradient to T, so to top, right? And if we now take a look at our page, check this out. Let's reload everything and we should be able to see, wow, they smoothly fade in and out. There's a smooth gradient at the top and at the bottom now. This looks so nice, man. Great job. And we're also making really good progress on our landing page. That's what I love to see. All right, next up, let's actually just finish the landing page. Hey, dude, I really like this effect. So we're gonna head over. We can close out of the reviews and the tailwind config. We don't need that right now. Let's head over back to our main page.tsx right here. And below the closing section, that section is done, the reviews are done. We're gonna create the last section of our landing page. And this section is going to contain, once again, our max width wrapper. You know the drill by now, so we get consistent width across our entire app. And this max width wrapper will get a class name of padding y24 to give this entire section some nice vertical spacing. Inside of here goes a div element, and that div is going to get a class name of margin bottom 12, a padding x of 6, and also on large devices a padding x of 8. Let's open this div up, one more div in here, and this one is going to get a class name. Let's scroll down a bit so it's easier to see. This one is going to get a class name of mxauto, a maximum width of 2xl, and on small devices a text-center. There we go. Let's open this up, and inside of here goes an h2 element. And honestly, we don't need to write the entire h2 again. We can simply copy and paste the h2 from up here from the previous section, so we know we get the exact same kind of styling. So let's mark this h2 element from the above section, and we can simply paste it right down here to be the headline of our news section. Now, of course, we're going to change the text. Instead of the what or, we're going to say upload your photo and get, then inside of the span, we're going to say your own case. And instead of the say at the very end, we're going to say now. There we go. Let's save that, see what happens. And we should see that reflected. Let's go into side by side here on our landing page. Very nice. Upload your photo and get your own case now. The only thing that's going to be styled different is that we're going to get rid of the underline. We don't need that in here. And then we're simply going to add one class name to the span, and that is going to be a BG green of 600. Oh, and actually two class names and text white. That's also important. Let's hit save, and we should be able to see your own cases now highlighted. That looks really nice. Okay, now two divs down, closing h2, closing div above the max width wrapper is where we are going to continue right now. And we're going to create a div here, and this will get a class name of mxauto, a maximum width of 6xl, a padding x of 6, and then on large devices a padding x of 8. Let's open this div up. One more div in here. This one gets a class name of relative, flex dash call, items dash center. On medium devices, a grid calls of 2, and a gap of 40. So quite a bit. All right. Now inside of this div, we're gonna put an image element, of course, self-closing as always, right? And this one is going to get a source, something we need to pass in here, and that's gonna be /arrow.png. You're gonna see what this does here in a second. And the class name for this image is gonna be absolute, a top of, and then as a custom value in these angled brackets, we're gonna say 25 rem. Then on medium devices, we're gonna say top minus 1/2 minus translate minus y minus 1/2. So these two are actually going to center this element vertically. If you've ever worked with absolute styling, you know that's what it does. We're gonna apply a z index of 10. And by the way, if you didn't work with it before, then now you know that's what it does. These two in combination center an element where you have the 1/2 and then the translate minus 1/2. This could also go for x, right? So we have translate x and we have medium left 1/2, and then it would be centered horizontally. And to prove to you that it works like that, let's actually do it. Let's say left 1/2 and then also minus translate minus x minus 1/2. There we go. We now centered it horizontally and vertically. Let's give it a rotate -90, and on medium devices and up a rotate -0 to kind of unrotate this image. Very, very nice. Below this image, let's create a div element. And this div element is going to get a class name of relative, a height of 80. On medium devices, it's going to get a height of full. There we go, a width of full. On medium devices and up, we're going to give it a justify self end. Let's give this a maximum width of SM for small, a rounded -XL, a background gray 900/5, that's the opacity once again, a ring -inset, a ring gray 900/10, again for the opacity, and on large devices and upwards, a rounded -2XL. And inside of this div, we're gonna put the image, right? That's gonna be an image tag just like so. As the source, we're gonna use /horse.jpg. And as the class name for this image, we're gonna say a rounded -MD, object -cover, a background of white, a shadow -2XL, so quite a bit, a ring -1, and a ring gray 900/10, and also a height of full and width of full as well. Let's save that and see what happens. That's gonna pop up right here. Beautiful. That looks very, very nice with the arrow pointing down. And if we give this more space, you're gonna notice something cool. Bam, the arrow doesn't point down anymore. Now it points to the right hand side. So this is fully responsive. No matter where the user is, which device they're using, this arrow will always point in the right direction. And that will be to the second thing that we're gonna put in here right below the closing div after the image. So that's gonna be right here with two closing divs and then the max width wrapper to go. This is where we're gonna put the phone, right? That we've used so often by now. The class name of this phone we're gonna give it is gonna be a width of 60. And the image source for this phone is gonna be /horse_phone, there we go, .jpg. And you're gonna see exactly what that looks like. The phone is gonna pop up. Wabam! There it is, right? How cool is that? We have the image pointing towards the phone, so it's very clear to our users what our shop does, right? What they can buy here. It's a random image they can turn into a phone case. It's very clear with the arrow. I really, really like this section. And now you know how to build something similar that's also fully responsive. Now let's give the user some reasons to actually buy from us, right? Why would they buy from our store? And to do that, we're gonna create an unordered list with a class name of mxauto, a margin top of 12, a maximum width of prose, on small devices, a text large, a space y of 2, and a width of fit. Now let's open up this UL, this unordered list, and create an li, a list element inside of it. The only class name this li is gonna get is gonna be a width of fit as well. And inside of this li, let's create a check icon as we've done before, right? And this one is gonna get a class name of height 5, a width of 5, and a text green 600, and an inline, and lastly a margin right of 1.5. There we go. Let's give this entire thing a bit more space so it's easier to see. And then below the check icon, but still inside of the li element, let's say high quality silicone material. There we go. And we can simply grab this li element, hold shift alt arrow down, bam, bam, bam. So we have 4 different check marks. The second one is going to say scratch and fingerprint resistant coating. The third one is going to say wireless charging compatible. And then the last one is going to say 5-year print warranty. And it's really important to give users a reason to buy from you, right? What makes you different than your competitors? Why would they care about what you have to offer? Well, you have to tell them, right? And that's exactly what we're doing here. I don't want to teach you how to just write good software with all the logic that's going to happen in this app with the configurator and the logic with purchasing stuff and so on. We're going to do all of that, but I also want to teach you all the other skills that go into making a really good landing page, right? And part of that is making very clear to users what your benefits are, what's the benefit in buying from you and not from someone else, right? And then after this li element, we are going to create a div element just like so. And this div is going to get a class name of flex and justify-center. Let's open up this div. Inside of here goes a link element. This is not self-closing, but this is going to say create your case now. And then we're going to put an arrow right icon from or icon library. We'll see it react. This arrow right will be self-closing and it will get a class name of height 4, width 4, and a margin left of 1.5. Now, Next.js is very angry at us. It doesn't know the href for the link, and it also doesn't know where the link is even coming from, right? So we still need to import that from next/link. Hit import there, and then it expects an href property. Where does this link go? And this will go to /configure/upload. As we've done before, that's the first step of our configuration process. It will be hosted on this domain right here. And also to make this link look good right now, if we save that, you're going to notice, well, this just looks really boring. Let's give it a class name. And this class name is going to be dynamic, so not a string. And it's going to be the button variants that we can simply import from our button component that gives this really nice class names out of the box. And as the object we're going to pass in here, the size is going to be large. And we still don't get IntelliSense here. That is weird. I don't know why. Anyways, the size is going to be large, and then the class name we're going to apply is going to be mxauto and a margin top of 8 to kind of separate it from the bullet points, and then hit save. And as you're going to see, there is a button that looks super, super nice, and we are almost done with the landing page. The only thing that's missing now is the footer, but for now that is very, very, very nice. And dude, I think the footer is actually going to be the easiest part of this entire application. It really adds to the app because it looks so official if it has a footer, right? That's why I think it's important. And any app has to have a footer, right? If you want this to be something serious, you have like your privacy policy, cookie policy in the footer, and so on and so on. It's very important to make the app look credible and, official. And so I want to show you how to build a good footer. And it's going to be really simple. We're going to create it in the components, new file, footer.tsx. Go ahead and create that. We can close out of the sidebar. There we go. By the way, if you're wondering how I'm toggling this without clicking, the shortcut is Control B. That's going to open and close your sidebar. That's just good to know, I guess. Let's say const footer, and that's going to be an arrow function. There we go, and export default footer at the very bottom, as always. Okay, we're going to return a footer HTML element from here. Of course, what else, right, in the footer? And this is going to get a class name of bgwhite, a height of 20, and relative, what is that? It is position. Okay, relative position. There we go. Inside of here, max with wrapper. You know the drill. As always, we're going to use it in here. And inside of the max with wrapper, we're going to create a div. And this div is actually going to be self-closing. Right, we're not going to use this. This can be self-closing. And this will just act as a visual separator between the main content and the footer. So this div is going to get a class name of border-t. So it just has a border at the top and a border gray of 200. And that's already it. That's the visual separator. Below this div at the same level, we're going to create one more div. And this one is going to get a class name of height full, flex-col. On medium, a flex-row, so it's going to change direction. On medium devices, a justify between, a justify-center by default, and an items-center as well. Now, inside of this div, one more div, and this one gets a class name of text-center. On medium, a text-left, a padding bottom of 2, and on medium devices, a padding bottom of 0. Let's open this up, and this is going to contain a p tag. There we go, with a class name of text-sm for small, and a text muted for ground, which is a default color that our UI library provides to us. This is like a normal kind of gray. It looks pretty good out of the box. And this p tag is going to contain and copy colon, which is the HTML way of just describing the copyright symbol. Let's already see what this looks like, right? Let's save the footer, and we're going to use the footer inside of our main layout. So let's switch into our main layout under source app, right? If you're wondering the file structure where that is, it's right here, layout in source app. This is where we are. And we are going to put the footer at the very bottom, still inside of the body, right here, footer, and import that. There we go. By the way, if you're wondering why the navbar is throwing an error, that's because TypeScript is kind of complaining. We're going to update TypeScript later. This is just a TypeScript thing. There's absolutely nothing wrong with your code. But if you're using not the latest version of TypeScript, sometimes it doesn't recognize React server components. So again, this is nothing wrong with your code. This is just TypeScript complaining. As you can see, everything works very, very well. And this is a known issue that was fixed in the newer versions of TypeScript. Anyways, since we included the footer, we should be able to see it. And there it is. There is our copyright symbol at the very bottom. Very nice. Let's make it even better. We're going to include the new date.get full year right here. So it's going to show the current year for the copyright, and we're going to say all rights reserved. Very nice. All right, let's save that. That already looks fine as hell. And now with one closing div to go, below the p tag, below one closing div, let's open up one more div. This one is going to get a class name of flex, items-center, justify-center. That's it. Inside of here, one more div. This one gets a class name of flex and space x of 8. There we go. Inside of this div is going to be a link element from Next.js, from next/link, and this is going to say terms, right? That's going to link to our terms of service. The href for this is going to be just a hashtag. I'm not going to implement the legal pages with you, right? You know how to do it after following this video, but I can't give you the legal text, right? I'm not a lawyer. That would be a pretty bad idea from me. And it also depends on the kind of business that you do. So this is where you put it. This is where you put the link to your legal page. But I don't think it makes sense in this video to build one together. Very boring, nothing new to learn there. We want to focus on the cool stuff, on the actual functionalities, right? So everything works, the payment, the configurator, that's what we want to do. That's what I want to teach you, not the boring stuff. Okay, so this one is going to get a class name of text small, a text muted foreground, and on hover a text gray of 600. There we go. And we can simply grab this link element and copy and paste it using Shift Alt arrow down once and twice so that we have 3 in total. The second one is going to say privacy policy. There we go. And the last one is going to say cookie policy, and hit save. And that's already our footer. Just like that, we have a functional, really clean, minimal footer in our web app that looks good both on mobile and also on desktop by changing the direction of flex from column to row. And I think that looks super nice. And that is our landing page. So quick summary, what we did until now, we completed the hero section. It looks absolutely great. Why should people use us, right? Social proof, very important that people know that we have happy customers. And with a demonstration of what our service actually does here on the right hand side, that looks nice with a little Case Cobra logo that I even prepared for this phone. Awesome. What our customers say with some reviews from Jonathan and Josh. Hell yeah. And some highlighted text in here that looks very nice. And then probably the highlight of this landing page, the phones that people have already configured that people are actually buying from our store. Which if you sell some stuff and people agree to publish it, then of course you could put your user data here, right? But again, of course, if they agree to publish it, you can't just use any kind of user data here. That doesn't fly. But this is also meant just as an illustration for potential customers to know what we sell, and it serves that purpose very well and just looks amazing. And then the upload your photo and get your own case now section, where it's very clear what our service does. We convert an image to a phone case here on the right hand side, indicated by the arrow. And if anyone is still not convinced, then we do it here. We name some benefits of purchasing from us and not the competitors, and make it very easy to actually get started with the case creation. That's our landing page. Very, very nice. And creating the case, that's exactly the first step. Uploading your image is going to be exactly what we're going to work on now, because right now if we click on the create case button, well, there's a 404 and it probably shouldn't be that way if you want to turn this into an actual proper, good looking and functional store, and learn how to do that along the way. Okay, little cut there, because for me it is the next day, but we just finished the homepage. I very much remember that, and now we are going to continue on the first step, which is the configure/upload. Let's give this a lot more space. And where is that going to happen? Well, let's go into our source folder, and let me zoom in so you can see this easier. Yeah, let's stay zoomed in like that, that's better. And now in our app folder, this is where we're gonna create a new page to match the URL that we link to when we click the create case button, right? That's /configure/upload. And how that works in Next.js is that we want to create a folder for that thing that's gonna be in the URL. So that's gonna be configure, right? That's going to be a folder name, and then we want /upload, right? So that's also going to be part of the URL, that upload. So it also needs to be a folder and not a file. So configure and then a folder inside of here called upload. And that is because Next.js has a file-based routing system, right? And then the content that's going to be displayed when we navigate to this path in the URL, that is going to be defined inside of a page.tsx, right? That's a naming convention that's enforced by Next.js. So Next, or framework, knows the content to display for this URL. All right, let's get rid of the sidebar. We won't need that for now. Let's focus on this page. And let me zoom in even more so you can probably see this even easier. So let's say const page, and this page is also nothing more than an arrow function, right? This is nothing more than a kind of regular React component that we simply name page. And we're going to export default page at the very bottom as well. Now, at the very top of the file, we're going to say use client. And because pages by default are server-side components, just like any other component, you know, we need to opt out of that behavior by using the use client directive at the very top. And that allows us to use React hooks, which we're going to need in this component for the interactivity, right? So first off, what we're going to do is return a div at the top level from this page. And this div is going to get a class name, and this class name is going to be dynamic and not a static string. So we're going to make use of our very nice CN. Let's import that. There we go, helper function. Invoke that, and as always, the first thing this takes is the default styles that are always applied. And that's going to be a relative, a height of full, a flex-1, a margin Y of 16, a width of full, a rounded -XL for extra large, a BG gray 900/5, so a very kind of light opacity that we're giving the background here, a padding of 2, a ring of 1, a ring dash inset, a ring gray 900/10, so kind of the same thing as the background, just a bit higher transparency. On large devices, we're going to give this a rounded -2XL. Let's give this a flex, a justify -center, a flex -call, and an items -center. Wow, that's a long class name, but I promise that is the longest class name in this entire component. And then what's going to be the dynamic part, right? Why did we make this dynamic? So let's open this up, and we're going to apply a class name of ring -blue -900/25 for the opacity, and also a BG blue 900/10, also very light opacity. And now comes the condition. When do we apply these two class names right here? And that's basically if the user drags a file over the upload form that we're building right now. So in order to keep track of that, we're going to make use of React state. And we're going to call the state is drag over, and set is drag over. And this is going to be equal to use state, something we still need to import from React. And by default, this is going to be false, right? And just for personal preference, I like to do this. You don't have to. I like to pass the actual generic of the type for this use state in here. by default, if we get rid of this, TypeScript can already infer this, right? TypeScript can know what it is from this value right here, but I just kind of like giving the generic explicitly. I think it's a good idea. It just looks better in my opinion. And then let's say is drag over, there we go, and right here for the condition that we want to apply these class names for. We can already save this file and we should be able to navigate to this page now if we hit the create case button right here in our top right. That's gonna take us to the page. Beautiful. Okay, we just see a little area here. It doesn't look like a whole lot yet, but it's just going to get better from here. So let's open up this div, and inside of this div, let's create one more div, and this one will get a class name of relative of flex-1, flex-call, items-center, justify-center, and a width of full. There we go. Now, one thing that's gonna make this entire upload page really cool is the ability for users to drag and drop their files, right? How do we implement that? How does that work? And well, basically React gives you some things like on drag, and if I hit the autocomplete, like on drag over, stuff like that, on drag start. React gives you all those events to build on top of. But we're not going to implement a solution from scratch here. I don't think it makes sense when there's already really well built, battle tested ones, such as, let me show you, React Drop Zone. This is a library specifically made for this exact purpose, right? So you can drag and drop files over an area. It makes it super easy. There's a lot of installs and it has been around for a long time. Let's see, yeah, like 2.5 million downloads per week. People like this package, and that's for a good reason. I'm using it in a lot of projects as well. Let's use this one instead of implementing all of it ourselves. This one just works. So let's say npm install react / drop zone. There we go. Hit enter. We can give this a bit less space so you can see the full name, react / drop zone. That's what we want to install. That's not even gonna download it, right? Because I'm using npm. That's very cool because, as I said, I use this in other projects. Therefore, it just needs to link my dependency on my PC, which is already there. That's why the npm cache is so cool, by the way. Anyways, after that's installed, let's go to our imports, and let's say import drop zone as a default import, by the way, not as a named one. And then while we're already here, we can also grab the file rejection type. We're gonna need that later, not right now, from react not zone, but drop zone. Oops, I changed my keyboard. There we go. React drop zone. That's where we want to get this from. And this drop zone that we just imported is nothing more than a regular React component we can now use. And you're gonna see why this is so cool. Okay, let's render out this drop zone inside of the div that we have just created. This is not going to be self-closing, by the way. And then if we see what this takes a lot of very cool stuff, like on drop accepted, on drop rejected, right? If the file like is not an image that we want to accept, but a video that the user is dropping in here, of course we want to reject that. And then with this function, we're going to be able to show errors later on. So let's kind of get this basic infrastructure right. For the drop zone, one thing we want to pass is the on drop rejected, as I just mentioned, right? There was no point in getting rid of that. And let's already kind of scaffold this out. Let's define a const and let's call it on drop rejected. So same naming, and let's just mark this as a function that does nothing for now, right? And same thing for the on drop accepted, const on drop accepted, and just kind of scaffolding this out makes it much easier for us later to actually just implement the functionalities, because we're already gonna be done in the drop zone part. So we're gonna pass the on drop rejected to the corresponding event on drop rejected in the drop zone. Same thing, you can probably guess for the on drop accepted. All right, we're just gonna copy and paste this function in here. Bam, there we go, we've got those functions. And one very cool thing we can also pass into the drop zone is the accept property. And this takes an object, and inside of this object, we can define key value pairs. Like for example, we want to accept image / PNG, right? And now as an array, we can simply tell the drop zone which file ending that is, and that's .png, right? So essentially all we're saying is, yes, we want to accept image PNG as a valid file type. Let's do the same thing, Alt, Shift and arrow down to copy this down. Same thing for image / JPEG, right, with an E. And then that's going to be JPEG, also with an E. And then of course, same thing for JPEG, but without the E, because it's kind of the same thing, right? It's both images, we want to support both. And just like that, we have all the file types that we allow the user to drop in. And if something that the user drops in is not one of these file types, then the onDrop rejected will actually handle all the logic. Awesome. And now as for the isDragOver that we defined right here, right? How do we know if the user is currently dragging over this kind of field? Well, the dropzone also gives us handlers for that. And these are not dropzone specific. These actually come from plain React. And that's on drag enter. And we can say, for example, let's invoke this function right away. Set isDragOver to true. And then of course the opposite, on drag leave, right? You can probably imagine what this is going to do. Same thing, arrow function. And we're going to say set isDragOver to false. Okay, great. And now let's finally open up this dropzone and get started in building the actual upload form. So one thing that the dropzone gives us before we define any JSX is that we can destructure some things from here, right? So this is going to be a function that returns some JSX inside of this dropzone. And if we now try to destructure, you're going to see something cool. Yes, we can. We get a lot of information from the dropzone. The accepted files, get input props, isDragActive, a lot of very cool stuff. And what we care about is the get root props function that we can destructure, and also the get input props function that we can destructure from here. And we're going to use them not right now, but in a second. First off, let's define a div inside of here. And this div is going to get a class name of height full, a width of full, a flex1, flex dash call, items dash center, justify dash center as well. And now before we open up the div, first off, after the class name still inside of the actual div with the brackets, we're going to spread in the get root props. So this is going to take whatever this function returns as properties, right, and pass it right into this div. And that just comes, this get root props, right here from the dropzone that we destructured, remember? So we don't need to worry about any of the props that this div actually needs to take in order for the dropzone functionality to work. It's handled by the library. And then inside of this div, let's now open it up. We're going to create an input element that's going to be self-closing. And this one very similarly gets the ... get input props, and we can simply invoke that, no arguments we need to pass in here, and just like that, bam, that's it, right? The drag and drop already works. And if we save that and reload our page, well, there's gonna be an error. Sometimes that happens. Let's reload our page again. Hopefully that error will be gone. Great, it is. And just to test this out, let's put some stuff into the input box right here. Let's reload the page. And if we now drag any file inside of here, we should be able to see, let's try this out. Let's drag it in here. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so we can see that while we drag this over, this is just an image template I have for this project. There's going to be like a blue background. And if we actually logged out anything in the on files accepted, right? Let's try that. Let's console.log accepted. There we go. Hit save. And let's kind of give this console a bit less space. Reload the page. And now if you drag anything in here and drop it, we can see accepted right here in our console. And we can handle later on the files accordingly. That's going to be the upload, right? That we can then proceed with the user stuff and upload their image and then forward them to the phone case creation, right? Beautiful. That works. Now, one thing that's kind of weird is that if the text wasn't there that we input, then this area would actually not take up any space, right? It looks very weird. It's very cramped together, and that's not really what we want. So there's a really cool fix we can apply to that. And that is actually not going to happen inside of this file. So before we continue here, let's just make this area take up all the space and push the footer to the bottom. It's going to look a lot nicer. And we're going to do that inside of our app folder. And then let's go into our configure and create a new file inside of this folder and call it layout.tsx and hit enter. And again, that's under configure. That's not in the upload folder. So this is in the configure folder. And this layout, const layout, is just going to be an arrow function as well. Nothing special, right? Yeah, the naming is a bit different, but let's export default layout at the very bottom. The naming is different, but nothing else. And this layout basically just takes children. And these children, we can inline the type, we can define it right here, are gonna be of type React node that we can import from React. There we go. And now what this layout is going to do is simply wrap all the children in a max width wrapper or reusable component that we can import inside of the layout and simply wrap the children right here inside of it. And this max width wrapper is going to get a class name, and that's going to be a flex of 1, a flex, and a flex dash call. And the interesting thing is in how Next.js layouts work is that this layout will now apply to all subfolders in the configure, right? Because this is later on where the design will also live, where we can like drag around the image and specify which phone specs we want to have, right? That's also going to live inside of the same folder. So the same layout is going to apply for it. And in order for these styles to actually do anything, we need to make a small change to our root layout.tsx as well. So that's literally going to affect all the pages inside of our entire application. And that change we're going to make in our root layout, by the way, if you're wondering where we are, that's source, app, and then this root layout right here. That's currently still giving us the TypeScript error. That's totally fine. It doesn't matter. We're going to fix it later. Let's wrap our children inside of a main tag. And let's paste the closing tag after the children. And this main tag is going to get a class name of flex, a flex dash call, a minimum height of, and then in angled brackets, we're going to calculate something. So we're going to say calc. And then in parentheses, this is going to be 100 VH, view height, minus 3.5 rem, which is the nav bar height, and then minus 1 px. Don't ask me why this 1 px, right? I just tried it out and it worked so nice. Otherwise, there was 1 pixel on the page scrollable. So that just fixes that. I'm not too sure why, to be honest, but it just works. And then inside of the div, we're going to create inside of the main right here. This one is going to get a class name of flex-1, flex-call, and a height of full. And then grab the closing tag and paste it after the children. There we go. And now the footer that lives below the main tag actually needs to go inside of the main tag. So all we're doing here is say, we want to align items vertically, right? And we're telling this div by saying flex1, which is just going to apply the flex 110%, that it needs to take up as much space as possible and actually push the footer down to the bottom. And if we save that, we should see what happens. Let's reload our page. Bam, there we go. That looks so nice. The upload area now takes up all the space on the page that it can, but without pushing the footer out of the boundaries of the page, right? It just looks so nice. Instead of actually giving the like upload area a fixed height, this will now always take up the correct amount of space, and it looks very, very good. Perfect. So with that styling fixed, we can actually proceed in our actual drop zone, right? So what's the logic for the file uploads? That's going to be the first kind of interaction with our backend. That's going to happen in this page.tsx, and I'm all here for it. So first thing we're going to do is do a conditional check below the input, and we're going to check if is drag over is true. And if it is true, in that case, we're going to render out the mouse pointer square dashed icon. Let's find it right here, the mouse pointer square dashed from Lucid React. Beautiful. This one is going to get a class name of height 6, a width of 6, a text zinc of 500, so a bit of a lighter kind of gray, and then lastly a margin bottom of 2. And now, if the drag over is not true, well, in that case, one of two things can happen. Either we are in a loading state. The user is currently uploading their image. It's currently being sent to the server, right? We're going to mock this out with a false for now. This is where we're going to implement a loading state together in a second. And if this mocked loading state is true, in that case, we're going to render out a loader2 icon from Lucid React, which is basically just a spinner. And to actually make it spin, we're going to give it a class name of animate-spin. As easy as that, right? A height of 6, a width of 6, and let's also give it a text zinc of 500, and lastly a margin bottom of 2 as well. And in the last case, right, if we're not dragged over and if the loading state that we're mocking is not true, in that case, nothing is happening. This should be the default state, and we're going to render out an image icon from Lucid React. This is going to be self-closing, and it's going to get a class name of height 6, a width of 6, a text zinc 500, there we go, and a margin bottom of 2. Let's format this. There we go. That looks so much nicer. Let's save that, see what happens. We should be able to see the icon pop up right here. There it is, the image icon. And if we click this, that's actually going to open up our file system. Beautiful. Okay. Now we know that works. We can now drag stuff over. We've tried that as well. That's going to trigger our onAccept function. Beautiful. And you know what? I'm not super happy with this false we just put here. I think a better approach is going to be to name this is uploading. There we go. And then to mock this is uploading at the very top, because that's what we're going to replace with the actual uploading state. So let's say is uploading at the very top, and let's just say that's equal to false for now. And we're going to implement that together in a second. But the beauty of mocking this for now is that we can already get the kind of JSX done. And get all the styling done, all the logic in place, and then implement this together. And similarly, there's going to be a state called is pending. But we don't have to mock this is pending. This is actually coming from something called a use transition. So this is going to be from use transition. This is a React hook. We can simply import, and we can actually destructure two things from this use transition, very similar to a use state. Right, so we're gonna put this into array brackets. This is same thing. The first return item in the array is gonna be the is pending state, and the second one is gonna be the start transition function. What is this good for? We're gonna use this when we navigate the user to the next step. So we can show a loading state while the page is loading. That's gonna be really, really cool. So we also have this is pending state, and if we are pending or uploading, in that case, we're gonna render out the loader too. So let's add the is pending state right here, and in that case we're going to display the loader to the user, and that way we don't have to mock that as well. Nice. Okay, so after this conditional check, let's continue with a div element. This one gets a class name of flex, a flex dash call, a justify dash center, a margin bottom of 2, a text of small, and a text zinc of 700. There we go. Let's open this div up, and inside of here, we're gonna do a check. If we are uploading, if is uploading is true, in that case, we are gonna render out a div element. And in the other case, we're gonna worry about that in a second. Let's make this div closing for now. There we go. And in the other case, we're gonna do a check if is pending. So are we currently redirecting the user to the next step? And if we are, in that case, we're also going to render out a div element. And if we are not currently pending, then we're going to do a check if we are currently dragging the image over the upload box, right? So is drag over. And if we are currently dragging over, in that case, we're going to render out a span element. And then in the last case, this is a long ternary, I know, in the last case, the default kind of case, in that case, we're also going to render out a span element. So that's a pretty long ternary, but that's actually not very unusual if you look at a lot of React projects, because actually this is not very unreadable, right? You can see if we are uploading, if we are pending, this is kind of like an if statement, but in JSX, and I honestly kind of like it. I think it's much more readable if we do it this way versus actually having a function or something down here and then handling the logic on top. We can just handle all the rendering logic right here in the JSX where it's meant to be, and I actually kind of like this. So in the case that we are uploading, this div is going to get a class name, and that's going to be flex dash call and items dash center. Let's open this div up, and this is just going to contain a p tag saying uploading dot dot dot. There we go. And then right below the p tag is going to live a progress bar. And the beautiful thing is our UI library already has a beautiful progress bar built in. Let's see what it looks like. And it looks like this right here. It looks nice. I mean, it's just a progress bar. What did you expect, right? It's simple. It looks clean. That's exactly what we want. So let's install that progress bar by going into our terminal. And let's say npx shared cn-ui at latest, there we go, add, and then it's called progress. And hit enter. And we can already, while that's installing, kind of take a look at the code demo. What is this going to look like? Well, it's going to look pretty simple, right? We have a value we can pass in here, and we can also give it a class name of the width that we want. And that's basically all it needs already to work. You know, it's very nice. So in here, right below the p tag, let's say progress once that's done installing, and we can import that from our custom UI components and not from Radix, right? From our custom folder that we put our components in. And this one is going to get a class name. There we go. And that's going to be a margin top of 2, a width of 40, a height of 2, and a BG gray of 300. There we go. And let's give this a lot more space. Okay. Now, the value for this progress value is going to be the upload progress, which is a constant that doesn't exist yet. So let's go ahead and create it together. And that's simply going to be a state in our application as well. Let's name this the const upload progress and the set upload progress. And this is going to be equal to use state. And this is going to be 0 by default. So this is going to be a number between 0 and 100. And let's also, just because I like this for personal preference, tell TypeScript explicitly that this will be a number. But you don't have to, right? It can definitely infer that from the default value. And you know what? Let's already see what this looks like. So if the is uploading state would be true, right? Let's kind of mock this out to true. That's the beautiful thing about mocking. We can do whatever we want. We can just change the Boolean without having to do any interaction to actually see the state. And let's set the progress to like 45, right? Let's just see what it looks like. Oh, all right, that already looks good. What's the error? Hydration failed. Server rendered agent. That's fine. We can just reload the page and the error is going to be gone. And if that should be an error later on before deployment, then of course we're going to fix it. But chances are some of these errors actually fix themselves. In Next.js, it's kind of crazy, but sometimes when you reload the page, it's just gone. There we go. Okay, so the error is gone. We get a beautiful uploading state. And if we click that, that's going to open the file system. And we get the upload kind of progress as well. Very, very nice. Okay, let's change this back to a 0. Let's default the is uploading back to a false. And let's quickly finish up the JSX because we're almost done. And then actually implement the uploading functionality. So in the case that we are pending, this div is going to get a class name of flex, flex-call items-center. And inside of here, we're going to say in a p tag redirecting, oh, not redirection, redirecting, please wait, ... There we go. That's all we're going to do inside of here. Then in the is drag over case, the span we're going to render out, that one is going to get a class name of font-semi-bold. And in here, we're going to say drop file. And now this entire span, we're going to wrap inside of a p tag. So we can say below the span and still inside of the p tag to upload. There we go. Okay, and now this last span element basically is going to be the same. I think I kind of messed up on the span elements. This does need to be a p tag on the main level. So we can just copy and paste from the is drag over case. Let's paste that inside of the standard last case as well. And then inside of the span, that is semi-bold, we're going to say click to upload. Or at the very bottom, still inside of the p tag, but not in the span, we're going to say or drag and drop to make it very clear to the user how they can put their files right here. That is very important. Beautiful. Okay, and now after the conditional check and after one closing div and before the second, closing div right here, we're gonna do one more conditional check, and that is if is pending is true. In that case, we're not going to render out anything, null. But in the other case where is pending is not true, we are not pending. In that case, we are going to render out a p tag. And that one is going to get a class name of text XS for extra small and a text zinc of 500. And this will tell people the allowed file types. So this is going to be PNG, JPEG, and also JPEG with an E. At the end, I know these are kind of same thing, but I honestly don't know why that's the thing. There are two different JPEG formats and we support both, right? That's all we're telling the user. Very, very nice. Click to upload or drag and drop. And there seems to be a space missing here. So let's add a JavaScript space behind the span element to actually fix that. Otherwise, this looks kind of weird. There we go. Click to upload or drag and drop. And now the spacing is actually correct. Beautiful. And now the most important part of this entire upload page, and that is going to be the upload, right? Where are we going to get the progress from? Where are we going to store the user files? What is going to happen when a user drops a file that is accepted? Well, spoiler alert, it's going to be uploaded to somewhere, and that somewhere is going to be, let's go to uploadthing.com. That's going to be to S3, and we're going to use a service in order to do that. Now, I want to be very clear why we're using this service. If I was building this myself, I would not be using this service. I would either go directly to S3, right? This is Amazon's simple storage service, and create an S3 bucket and upload directly to that. That's what I would do, right? Or also go to Cloudflare R2, which is an even cheaper object storage with an S3 compatible API, right? That's pretty cool. And I would actually probably go with Cloudflare. I've never worked with them. I'm more familiar with S3. I've used S3 a lot in the past, but Cloudflare is cheaper and it also has zero egress, right? So when you pull data out, then it's not expensive. In S3, it actually is. But we're not going to use any of these two tools that I would use personally. Instead, we're going to use a service. First off, because this service doesn't require a credit card, and AWS S3 does. And secondly, because this service called Upload Thing makes it much easier to get started and uploading. Right? It literally just takes like 5 minutes to implement. And I think it makes a lot of sense for a video like this because we want to learn about the core logic of implementing all of this and not really how file uploads work. If we were to do that from scratch in S3, not only again would you need a credit card, but it would take like 1 or 2 hours that we don't get to build any kind of cool functionality. So that's why we're using this tool. I want to be very clear as to why we're doing this because again, I would not use this personally. It can be cool for kind of getting apps up and running fast. But anyways, we're going to use it right now together because it makes the entire file uploading very easy and simple to get started with. So after logging in and going to our dashboard, you can log in via GitHub. We're going to say create a new app. And the app name, what do we want to name it? Let's say Case Cobra dash, let's just say dash dev because I already have the Case Cobra project in here, but you can name it just Case Cobra. The app URL, we're not going to pass anything in here. And now the region is going to be paid plan required to change from default. Okay, never mind. We're going to stick with the default. And then let's hit create app. There we go. Congratulations, you've got a place to store files. Okay, great. And that's actually going to give us the API key that we need. So let me zoom out just a bit and let's go over to API keys here on the left. And that's going to give us two things, the upload thing secret and the upload thing app ID. And let's make them visible. Let's copy them over. And we can simply grab those and paste them into the .env file that we already have in our project. And we can just paste them in as they are. The env file, remember, it's at the root of our project. That's where we're pasting this in. And what this allows us to do is to now install the package we can use to interact with the service that makes it very easy for the file uploads in our app. And that is going to be pnpm install. And let's say upload thing. And that's also going to be at upload thing / React. These are two different packages. One is there for the core functionality and one is there to provide us with helpers for the React kind of library or framework, whatever you want to call it. So React specific stuff that we can use that makes it easier to integrate into our project. And let's go over to the documentation of this upload thing, because that actually gives us a bunch of code to copy and paste into our project, which makes it very easy to get started with. And let's give this a bit more space. There we go. Let's navigate over. By the way, we can close out of that. Let's navigate over to the Next.js app right here. Oh, and yeah, we already got the packages installed. Great. Okay. We added the environment variables. That's perfect. And basically what it tells us to do is to go to this file path right here. So let's give this a bit less space again. That's going to be under, and let's close out of the page for a second. That's going to be under source app. And then let's create a new folder inside of our API folder. And that's going to be called upload thing, and hit enter. And then in here goes a core.ts. That's what it's telling us. And we can simply hit the copy button up here and paste all the code inside of our app. Okay, let's clean up some of this. We can get rid of the console logs. We can get rid of all the comments. I think it looks very unorganized. Let's get rid of that. There we go. And we can also get rid of the comments up here, up here, up here. And let's leave the rest for now. Okay, the middleware, we're going to change it later. Let's leave it like that. Just get rid of the comments to make it look better. And then we're going to go into this file path right here. So basically at the same level as the core.ts, we're going to create a route.ts. And this is going to be responsible for actually handling the API requests that upload thing makes to upload the images for us. And we can simply grab the code again, paste it in here, and then get rid of all the comments explaining the code. And hit save. Great. And that's almost all of the configuration work that we need to do for upload thing. So we can head back over to our own page, give it less space. And I say almost because there's one small thing that we still want to do, and that's going to happen inside of our lib folder just right here. And let's create a new file in here called upload_thing.ts. And inside of this file, we're going to build on top of the React helpers that they provide us. So we're going to say export const, and we're going to destructure something from the generate React helpers. And if we try to auto import this, doesn't work. Pro tip, if ever the auto imports don't work, you can reload your window by pressing Control Shift and P and then hitting develop reload window. And sometimes that makes the auto imports work. Again, not this time. Okay, perfect. Well, let's just import the generate React helpers function or self then, whatever, man, from the add upload, not upstash, upload thing/react. There we go. And we can simply invoke this function. And this function also takes a generic to make it fully type safe if we want. And that's going to be our file router. And we can simply import that from app API upload thing core. So that's going to be a type defined in a file that we already pasted in. Right, remember that's in our core.ts, that's what we just pasted with the middleware where we removed all the comments. That already has a type that we can now use in our front end to make this entire thing type safe across the stack. Right, and from here we want to destructure two things, which is the use upload thing and also the upload files that we can now make available to our React components to use anywhere. Right, and that's literally all the setup we need to upload files. That's why I wanted to use the service, because it's so easy to get up and running fast. So now we're going to go back into our upload page. And now inside of here, we can actually define what should happen when a user uploads an image. So we're going to say const and destructure later above these two functions. And that's going to be use upload thing. So the hook we just got from the React helpers. And this will take our image uploader, so that's going to be the endpoint that we want to upload to, and that is also defined in our core file. Right, if we take a look at this, we have the image uploader, that's what it's called, so that's what we get on the front end as well. This is fully type safe. How cool is that? And we can also pass this some options, right, as an object, as the second argument we're passing in here. That is going to be the, well, we get a bunch of stuff, but what we care about is the on client upload complete. Right, and this is a callback function in which we can simply destructure from an array the data that we get back from upload thing. If we hover over this, this is going to be the uploaded by as a string. Where does this come from? Why do we get this? Why is this type safe? Well, because that's what we return right here in the on upload complete. If I say name John right here, then check out what happens. Name string. This is fully type safe across the stack. This is our backend. This happens on the server. This happens on the client, but it's still completely type safe. That is very, very cool. And in our case, what we want is not a name of John, right? We don't care about that. Instead, what we care about is something called a config ID. And one config will always correspond to one spec'd out phone, right? What is the color? What is the image on the phone that the user configured and dragged around? And basically, like, do they have the smooth texture or the other texture and so on? That's going to be a config, all of that information. And that's what we want to know in the server file as well. And in order to do that, we can add a .input to our image uploader, which takes a z.object. And now what is z? Well, basically, we don't have that in our app. It doesn't exist. But z will come from a library that is called Zod. Right here. You might have heard of it, maybe not. It's a schema validation library. It allows us to pass in at runtime any object and then parse it to make sure that the type is what we expect. Let's say npm install Zod to install that package, and that then allows us to actually import at the very top, import z from Zod. Now, runtime validation is a really good idea, because not only can we ensure that this object, right, let's just demonstrate this. Maybe that was a bit abstract. Let's practice this. In here, we can pass an actual object, and now we can define whatever we want. For example, that we expect a config ID to be passed into this. And this is going to be a z.string that we can invoke optional. So you don't have to pass it, but if you do, then we can work with it later. And that's going to be important for actually creating this config in our database once the image is uploaded, because this will run once an image is uploaded from the user, right? And now we can simply destructure that input right here in our middleware. And we can get rid of all the logic that is already in the middleware. We don't need it. And we can simply say return input inside of object notation. Why do we do this? Basically, we're taking in the input, we're passing it through the middleware, and finally, we can now receive it in or on upload complete, because the metadata that we get in here now contains a config ID, whatever we return from the middleware, right? So that's how we pass stuff around from the middleware to the actual handler of what should happen once the image is completely uploaded. And in here, now in the onUpload complete, we can destructure the config ID from the metadata.input, right? And this can now either be a string or it can be undefined. And for now, we're also going to return the config ID from the onUpload complete. Now this happens on the server, right? This all happens on the server. And by the way, we can get rid of the auth function. We don't need that. There we go. And we can get rid of the unused imports by pressing Shift, Alt, and O, by the way. Like a pro tip. And this config ID, we're going to do some additional logic here later, but this happens on the server, and whatever we return right here is now passed back to the client, so we can use it on the client, right? How is that going to look like? Well, we can get access to the config ID now, const config ID in the onUpload complete, and that's going to be equal to data.server data. And now this is fully type safe. How cool is that? Right, so we now have the config ID that is specific to the phone that the user has just configured and uploaded the image for, and we can now redirect the user to the second step because their image is now uploaded. When this fires, right, everything was successful, we got the image. Now the user is ready for the second step, and we can push them there using our start transition, right? So we can display a beautiful loading state while the user is being redirected. And the start transition takes a callback function in which we can push the user to the new URL path. And in order to modify the URL, we're going to need access to the const router, which is the use router hook from /navigation.